got you. I got you. I should have said 22:45 or some shit. Welcome,
you should have been on gamer
welcome.
time. Tell me we're gonna be here early. I'll come in early.
Yo, what up, and welcome to Pnoid News, man. Listen, look, we're back, we're ready. You know what I'm saying? We done deleted that shit from last night because it was unnecessary to have on this channel. Because you know what, man, we do good work over here, and man, we got an all-star cast tonight. We got our boy Tkmaou, we got Navis, and we got Ad Hoc, and we got a special guest, Neuro, right from the Rhetoric server. This guy is amazing. He's great. We're probably going to be doing a whole bunch of projects with them and stuff. Neuro, you want to introduce yourself and tell you what you do? Tell people what you do over there in Rhetoric.
So I run a server on Discord, Rhetoric, that's mainly for debate and open discussion about politics, religion, social issues, current events, and just it's focused on community as well. So anybody interested, you come check us out at Rhetoric on Discord. You can find it on Discord.
The link is
in
the
our
description.
URL debates.
The link is in the description. Legit. I make sure I had a link in the description, and it is a forever link. So, you know what I'm saying? If you're listening to this in the future, don't worry about it. You can still click it. Dudleyus is here. Johnny Boy's in the chat. We're getting started, man. We're getting started. So, Tkmaou, how you doing tonight, my brother?
I'm doing all right. I just listened to this joint one more time to brush up on what we're doing. I think we're going to have fun here. Either that or we're going to start yelling at each other for something stupid.
Well, now, you know how it works, man. You know how it works. Yo, Ad Hoc, man, my brother, how you doing tonight, man?
Doing okay. I had to get some drink. This looks like it's going to be a long one. It's like, 2 hours in terms of the video, so I'm definitely going to need to wet my whistle. Otherwise, I'm going to dry out and start coughing like a motherfucker.
I think it's like an hour and 20. That's why I picked this one, because I didn't want it to be 2 hours. Legit, I think it's like an hour and 20, but it's still, it's a nice long read, and we're gonna have a good stream about it. Naviston, my brother, how you doing tonight?
Oh, I'm doing all right.
Okay, short and sweet. You know what I mean? Like, that was eloquent in its brevity. How it works, right? All right, so you have the thing up, man, Ad Hoc. Do you have the whatchamacallit?
I have the thing up. I am ready to go. All you do is give the word, and we'll launch into it.
All right, man. So we're gonna get into this. You know what I'm saying? So let's rock and roll, my brother. This is Gray Mirror, Chapter 4: Principles of Any Next Regime. Let's rock and roll, my brother. This is from September 27th, 2020. Mencious, moldbug, aka Curtis Yarvin. Let's rock, homie. You're saying let's get started. Anybody interrupt at any time you want to. You know what I'm saying? We'll break stuff down. All right, let's go.
All right. Chapter 4: The Principles of Any Next Regime by Curtis Yarvin, localized on the Gray Mirror. What are we going to do here? Well, let's try to understand the purpose of government from scratch. It is 2020. We are all nihilists. Whatever this weird regime we inherited from the 20th century actually is, almost none of us have any significant positive belief in it. Where authentic public engagement still exists in the American political system, it is purely negative engagement. Where we still support any of the system's organs, wings, tentacles, departments, corporations, or dignitaries, it is only to resist some office, figure, principle, or movement which strikes us as still more egregious.
Egregious.
There we go. Slipping up on English language. All right. It is an exaggeration to say that the whole show is fake, but the whole show is fake. So if we nihilists do not even think about the show, much less try to participate in it, and we do not dream its dream, what are we even thinking about? Nihilism, detachment, and absolutism. The substantive content of 21st century nihilism, like so many esoteric philosophies cynically crafted to entice the young, is a twisted pair of yin and yang, detachment and absolutism. These concepts do not overlap, but they fit. In previous chapters, we have thrown a lot of ink at detachment. In this chapter, we start on absolutism. Detachment, the yin of nihilism, means disengaging, detaching, withdrawing, or resigning from every form of power or ambition for power, influence, or relevance under the present regime. The Russians used to call this internal exile. Detachment is surprisingly hard, especially if power can't resist the joy of hunting you. What saves you is that power always has enemies, and it hunts them down first. And you, actually, are not one of them. You appreciate and respect power. It is what it is. Your magic is the magic of the weak, not the strong, not the wolf and the bear, but the owl and the fox. Better to know than to see. Better to see than be seen. Better to be seen than noticed. Better to be noticed than feared. Better to be feared than hated. Better to be hated than beaten. Better to be beaten than killed. And better you are killed than your family. The fox has no illusions and is always, in principle, on the move.
All right, hold up. Like, I want to speak on this, right? Because I think it's kind of important as far as stuff's concerned. Man, listen, all right, yo. I think we got some new individuals in chat. I want to throw them some wrenches. All right, so there's a reason why it is that I talk about, you know what I'm saying, being like a white trash person and from a trash no state and all these type of things. It's because of the fact that, like, I want us to, like, disengage from the ideology that we actually run anything. Right. And I want us to have the full understanding of, like, what we really are, you know, because we are not, you know what I'm saying, like, part of the ruling class of this country. You know what I mean? Whether we want to or we don't want to, legitimately, we are part of, you know what I mean, the class of this country who, you know, are really just aimed at as dumb consumers and shit. Right. In the end of the day, we're just supposed to be cattle. And, like, most of us are, and we don't even realize it. And so, like, when you start thinking of yourself as, like, being white trash and being, you know what I mean, the lower part of this country, you know what I mean, that kind of gives you a freedom to operate that you don't have when you stand here thinking that it's like the government's actually representing you. Does anybody, like, understand that as a whole? No, yes. Don't everybody answer at once.
I know what you're getting at. Sure.
I know what you're getting. It's basically at the time is that we got to realize that our votes really don't matter because whoever we elect has already been handpicked by the educational and ruling elites that have already gone to college, and they just pretend to be one of us to get votes. And once they're in, they'll just fuck off and do nothing.
Well, I feel like this is kind of in the same route of, like, where does optimism become cowardice, right? Like, if you really think that something's just going to work out and you just let it get worse as a result, aren't you just being a bitch? So wouldn't it be more realistic or even more courageous to just acknowledge that it's not going to work out, at least not in the best way possible from your perspective, and work from there?
Well, isn't it better that we know our place?
Yeah, like, objectively where you're starting from. Like, even if you're, like, an aspiring ruling class person, you got to understand where you start from in order to get where you want to go.
No.
Well, in the other vein of that, you remember, evil prevails when good men do nothing. When does nihilism actually become cowardice? If you start from a place of practicality, you dream the dream of something that could be better, you know, that's all fine and dandy. You've got the two there. It's the bridge between the two, the action. The doers do, the sayers think. Are we going to do, or are we just going to sit here and whine about it and just hope it gets better?
Well, then you run into the issue of, you know, the doers do, those who can't teach, and our societies is ran by teachers.
I think this actually gets into it, so I think we're getting a bit ahead of TK.
It does.
But yeah,
I
see where you're coming from.
Like, yeah, Neuro, what do you think, my brother?
So it sounded like me you were speaking as if the lower classes are just cattle, right? Commodities.
Yeah.
But I'm going to assume then that what is the ruling class? And if the ruling class is the bureaucracy, the politicians, or even CEOs, don't you believe that even those people who come from humble beginnings have, at least still in America, maybe not as much as in the past, but there still is, you know, enough social mobility to raise yourself up the socioeconomic hierarchy or ladder to become one of these people? So maybe the idea that, the common people, the lower classes, can't stage a revolution and overtake the ruling class, because ultimately maybe another group of the ruling class would actually stage the revolution themselves, like George Washington and such, weren't commoners. But to become, I still think you're able, in this country at least, to become one of those people, part of the ruling class, that could then splinter off and challenge the ruling class. Does that make sense?
Oh, yes, it does. It does. Right. And like, see, this is where the mentality gets to. So like, think about it like this. No matter how much money Donald Trump had, he was still always going to be white trash.
He was president of the United States, and he affected some pretty serious change in the country.
Well, he just continued the changes that were already happening. The truth of the matter is, like, we could elect a cat to the president and it really wouldn't matter in the end of the day.
And Navi. 2024, we put Monica in there.
We'll need enough autistic shit posters to make that, and we need to get a cosplayer.
Hell yeah.
So I feel that he affected the way our foreign policy is currently positioned.
If we're going to get a woman in office, she might as well be 2D.
Navison, hang on. We're having an actual conversation. But like, here's the thing though. Like, he didn't do anything that wasn't already on the way.
Well, I think that's debatable. They've been trying to, cover up this underbelly of dissension in the U.S. for decades. Primarily, those are the alt-right, those disenfranchised and marginalized Americans in the Bible Belt and the Midwest. And Trump brought all of their voices up top to be heard. And I think the establishment, what you would call the cathedral, has now been forced to kind of recognize that these people do in fact exist and that they're a force to be reckoned with. And I think as awful, and I'll try to be quick, but as awful as the assault, sorry, and I'll try to be quick, as awful as the assault was on Washington this January, I think it proves that, I think it scared the shit out of the establishment. And I think it proves that people are willing, to go that extra mile for what they want in this country. And Trump was kind of behind that.
It did, actually. The National Guard is still there. The wired fences are still up there. Eventually, D.C. is no longer going to be a welcoming tourist attraction anymore.
Yeah, but we're still not part of the cathedral, and we probably never will. I mean, like, you can become part of the bureaucracy. You know what I'm saying? If you're interested in becoming part of the bureaucracy, if you're interested in selling your soul and, losing your values and your culture and your heritage and all the things that go with it, like, yeah, all day long, you can become part of the cathedral. But if you don't, you're not gonna as a whole. That's the issue. That's what I'm saying. Like, you have to recognize the fact that, like, what we are as people, right? Like, you have to recognize that, like, look, we are not, the individuals who run this country, and the individuals who run this country fucking hate us. Right. And that's kind of the whole point. And once you recognize that, it gives you the power to, like, be able to move about in society the way, you want to. And, actually, like, look at things from that type of perspective. Rather than just accepting the fact that, or just thinking in the fact that, like, you're actually running things. You know what I mean?
I understand your position. Sure.
That's kind of my mentality. But all right, ad hoc. Let's keep rocking, my brother.
All right. The Detached Nihilist is a virtual expatriate, a guest in his own country. If he was in Thailand, he would respect the king of Thailand. He is here, and here he respects the powers that be, which are everywhere anyway. He respects both the formal laws and the real laws. Either or, both may be, for his impieties deployed against him. If power's dogs are really sit on him, he may run, but he will never fight. Absolutism, the yang of nihilism, means thinking ex nihilo, from scratch, from first principles, not relative to any specific past or present reality. Nihilists do care about reality. We care about it so much that we accept no substitutes. The model of the Royal Society crafted in happier times. Nullus in verbatim. We take no one's word for it. That's what it means to believe in nothing. Oh, geez, I'm getting some Assassin's Creed stuff here. Nothing is true. Everything is permitted. There we go. That's what it was. The system has gotten many things right. There are whole fields of knowledge, such as math, where the system may be asymptomatically perfect. These generally tended to be the same fields in which Soviet academia was also strong, always the hard fields. But as with Soviet science, we cannot accept any knowledge from the system, however internally reputable, without some other justification, narrow or broad, of its validity. Just as some Soviet departments were almost perfectly untainted by power, others were almost perfectly corrupted by power. There's not much left of Soviet psychology, Soviet political science, Soviet histography. A broad justification is like Soviet physics is valid. A narrow one is like this Soviet psych paper is valid. Either demands an argument. Soviet physics cannot be accepted in verbum, either because of the prestige of the USSR or the prestige of physics. And nor can any Soviet paper just because it appeared in some prestigious Soviet journal. The tradition of scholarship is to stand on the shoulders of giants. Typically, the scholars do not think much about the giants. They take the giants for granted. These giants, they know they are good and friendly giants. They are not gods. They do err. But their errors are accidental, random noise. It is our tasks on their shoulders to correct them. The situation of the scholar changes once he realizes that there are certainly plenty of giants in the crowd he is surfing. There are also more than a few ogres. The errors of the ogre are not accidental. They are sins, even crimes of various degrees. Auden knew the species. August 1968. The ogre does what ogres can, deeds quite impossible for man. But one prize is beyond his reach. The ogre cannot master speech. About a subjugated plain, among its desperate and slain, the ogre stalks with hands on hips, will drivel gushes from his lips. Every true scholar remembers the first time they set foot on the shoulders of an ogre. That foot itched savagely, and at once, producing an irresistible desire to be standing on the ground. Those who escape this allergic reaction are blessed. Not scholars, but strivers. They may go far indeed in the poison garden of the cathedral, and, if lucky, even grow up to be ogres themselves. Over time, the whole nave fills up with ogres. The absolutist, back on the ground, has a huge problem. We really do have to start ex nihilo. There are real giants on whose shoulders we could stand. Nihilists will not stand on anything's shoulders again without a good, hard look at its intellectual DNA.
All right, hold up. All right, so like, I was thinking about this earlier, right? You know what I'm saying? Yo, man, look, man, we're reading some shit, you know what I'm saying, that is kind of like leaning on English literature as much as possible, right? So, like, Ballistic Zero, understand that's kind of where we are, right? So, all right, here's the mentality that I was thinking about earlier. The mentality is that as we look at stuff, and the reason why you want to look at stuff like from a nihilist view is you want to look at things and go like, why is this the way it is, right? Rather than just accepting that it is the way it is. Like, so why do we have religion? Well, it's because like your religion allows you to basically make a bargain with the future, right? It goes, all right, if I act the proper way now, tomorrow my life will be better, right? And that was the original bargain that we made with religion just to begin with. It was like, hey, look, you know, if we stand here and sacrifice at this moment, you know, I mean, tomorrow, you know what I'm saying, we'll have enough food to get through, or like our people will, you know what I'm saying, be better and stronger, more cohesive, and allow our society to be able to be better to like outrule the next people or be able to last in hard times. And that's, you know, I mean, like kind of the whole point, right? And that's the mentality that I think that we should have with our society, is not just that like we look at it from the perspective of, you know, I mean, like this is good or this is bad. We should look at it from like, hey, look, you know, like why is it that we're doing what we're doing, and is there a purpose behind it, and like does that purpose still stand as a whole? Right. And especially when it comes to our government and our politics and, you know, I mean, our, you know, I mean, bureaucracy and things of this nature. And that's kind of where the mentality is. Right. You know, look, man, I like Ad Hoc's reading, man. You can shut the fuck up in the chat. God damn it. Let him do what he does. Right. Anyway. So like, yo, what do y'all think about that mentality? Shit. God damn it.
I feel where you're going right there. I think it'd probably be a little bit illustrative to point out just some contemporary example of what he means by like giants and ogres in this type of case. And I'm a nerd, so I can do that.
I like that. I like that mentality. Keep walking with that, my brother.
All right. So like a giant would be someone like, you know, Isaac Newton or Albert Einstein, somebody who did the heavy lifting on some real basic premises for a worldview to just make a lot of types of analysis possible that, you know, you couldn't necessarily do if you're just a regular dude putting in regular dude time trying to figure out a problem, right? Just because you can just use these massive tools to see what's going on and just assess a problem. You're sitting on the shoulder of a giant. And this is somebody who's navigating the world in an intelligent manner, and you know, they're massive, so they're going to end up stepping on some shit. But like, that's because they're massive. It's not because they're a bad person. Whereas other times you have people who are massive and like intellectually influential. People like, for example, Judith Butler. This is a feminist scholar who ends up being cited for a lot of what ended up being family court decisions, right? Like she's one of these people who thinks that like she started introducing this concept where like all sex is rape, and once that gets into the family court system, that really starts wrecking a lot of people's lives. But you have this kind of worldview and you have a massive amount of literature backing it up. You ride that into any particular subject and you can just dominate the field out of the fact that you have this massive amount of social and political and academic leverage, not necessarily because your ideas or your scholarship are necessarily very good. And once you see that, like, academia is not just built on the shoulders of giants, but rather on the shoulders of giants and ogres, the intellectual landscape becomes fucking terrifying, because that means you don't know whether that thing that has been carrying you along to make your life possible is a giant or an ogre, and you have to really look at it in order to understand which one of those it is. And that's not a great place to be as an in general thing, when you don't know how much of what you know is even valid or done in good faith. I don't know if I've presented that well enough, but I'll go ahead.
You presented it really well.
Yeah, to tag on to the end of that, I think that's where he's coming from, where he's saying that we're all generally nihilists. You know, we don't know if it's going to be a giant or an ogre. Therefore, take everything with a grain of salt. Nothing is true. Everything is permitted. We still have to take into account what it is they're saying and give it a real hard look, to look deeper into it, to say, does this hold up, or is this just bullshit that's going to squish under your boot?
Yeah, you got to do the math on everything and the research on everything. You know what I mean? Like legit, like, cause like 90%, like what did my man say? He said, believe like half of what you see and none of what you hear, some shit like that. Right. You know what I mean? And it's really what it is. Like, cause you have to get to that point where I trust no goddamn fucking media sources. I trust no academic sources at this point. You know what I mean? Until like I actually see shit working in real life, I'm like, yeah, nah. You know what I mean? Like I'm not gonna fucking trust anything you say, because if I can't do the math myself, I can't do the research myself, I'm just not with it. You know, that's kind of the mentality as a whole. But yeah. Yo, Nero, you got anything to add in, my brother?
No, I see the distinction between the ogres and the giants. And I understand, you know, where you guys are coming from. I don't really think I need to add to this part at all.
Got you. All right, ad hoc. Let's keep rocking, my brother.
Yes, I did, Ballistic Zero. I think it applies nicely to what's going on here. Moving on. All right. Intellectual DNA. This leaves the nihilist scholars with a lot more work, mostly in the soft scholarship than their orthodox peers. But is this a problem? In the Western world, experiencing an embarrassing shortage of real work to occupy its overeducated, overpopulated clerks, the more scholarship we find corrupt and discard, the more work we give ourselves. And then when whole fields must be discarded, the creative opportunities become immense. The 20th century history, for instance, is almost a completely fallow field. Beyond some facts and figures, nobody really knows anything about it. It's a fascinating period which has been barely studied, except, of course, by its own writers, all of whom were attached to one of its contending factions. Imagine reading the Third Reich, the USSR, even the Roman Empire through only its own authorized eyes. But our regime is different! Sorry, dude. The primary sources, voluminous in this period, are as interesting as ever. They are not history, though. But this is not a work of history. At the end of this chapter, we'll make our first foray into another area, absolute public policy, which is not just a fallow field, but an entire unexplored valley. Hopefully you will like the look of this valley, since we'll be spending the rest of this book there. We'll also spend the rest of this chapter getting there. At least it's shorter than the last. So, getting to zero. By rejecting precedent, ceremony, and tradition, absolutists get to design the future from first principles. But starting from zero is only half the journey. The other half is getting to zero from our principles. They may suck, but they are ours. One way to sell absolutism in America to Americans, which is almost as hard as selling BLT's diocese, is to derive our doctrine not from rational first principles, like a total spurg, but from some long-hallowed American mantra, which we all adore. Let's start from Lincoln's great line, government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Who doesn't have Lincoln? No one that matters. Who disagrees that this phrase describes the ideal government? Probably no one at all. Let's drill into our lovely Lincoln line and see where it takes us. First, can anyone explain the difference of the people and by the people? I can't. I think Lincoln thought three things were more poetic than two, which is true, unless of means over, but this is implicit in the definition of government. Either way, we are down to government by the people, for the people. But for the people is definitely not saying the same thing as by the people. These are two Boolean attributes, like saying cold, fresh water. At least for drinking, cold, fresh water is best. Hot, salt water is the worst. But if we have two orthogonal Boolean attributes, we get four choices. Suppose we are marooned in the middle of the Pacific without a paddle. Suppose we could drink at any time, but we only had two choices, cold salt water or hot fresh water. Is it possible that one of these inferior liquids, neither of which is cold fresh water, could nonetheless quench our thirst? If we could drink cold salt water, we could drink the ocean. If we could drink hot fresh water, we could actually drink out of that black barrel behind the mast. We've been wondering what that barrel was for. Adrift in mid-Pacific, and our only fresh water is baking in the sun, hot as hot tea, and utterly undrinkable. Or so we thought. In historical hindsight, our discovery that while cold fresh water is ideal, the hot fresh water we actually have, though way less refreshing, works almost as well, and way better than drinking the cold, salty ocean, will be as clear in this metaphor. Today, you are 1 in 1,000 if you can step through the answer like a 6-year-old. Like Lincoln, we want government for the people and by the people. Suppose we can't have both. Suppose governments by the people cannot actually deliver government for the people. Suppose we just have to choose. Which matters most? That our water be fresh or that it be cold? I know what Lincoln would say. Is this a hard choice? Let's reduce it to ad absurdum. to the choice between peace and harmony under the rule of some autistic alien AI overlord, which makes the justest of laws and enforces them efficiently and impartially, or chaos and anarchy in which we are bullied, assaulted, extorted, beaten, and even slaughtered at the hands of our own deranged cousins, who, even as kids, never really seem to be totally right in the head. Fresh water is a necessity. Cold fresh water is a luxury. Government for the people is a necessity. Government by the people is a luxury. We are not always forced to choose between necessity and luxury. Sometimes we are, and when we are, we need a way of telling the difference. Pope's rule. This idea that the government is first and foremost for the people is historically normal. Since we are all Americans now, you do have to pull the historical camera a long way back in time to see how normal it is. Perhaps the best literary expression of it is what we can call Pope's rule. For forms of government, let fools contest. Whatever governs best is best, even if it's an alien AI autist. So 250 years ago, said Alexander Pope, not an actual pope, actually kind of a weirdo, whose couplet I have here, in imitation of the great Dr. Bronner improved. If you cannot accept Pope's rule, it means that your view of the government and power is mystical rather than instrumental. You believe that certain that beings have certain inheritable rights to political power, regardless of the good or evil this power does. You believe that even a small amount of evil is a price worth paying, since political power is essential to the human soul. This is a normal aristocratic way to think about government. If you think this, you are or want to be an aristocrat. This is fine. It's good to be or become an aristocrat. But this desire, like all desires, can bend your logic, and bent logic is a very dangerous toy. The belief in a birthright of political power falls under whom's ought rather than his is. It is an ethical or aesthetic judgment. Hamlet, Prince of Denmark, also felt he had a hereditary right to political power. It was essential to his human soul. God help the nation, which makes itself a nation of Hamlets. Dear reader, logic cannot dissuade you from this aesthetic. I urge you to question it. If this is too hard, you may not get much from the following discourse. For the rest of this book, good government is government for the people. As nihilists, we feel comfortable in denying that anyone, whether the Prince of Denmark or a citizen of Dagestan, is born with any moral right to any political power. The only question of government in Denmark or Dagestan is, what is good for Denmark or Dagestan?
All right, so like everybody get where we are as a whole.
Yeah, like
Yep, definitely.
Basic concept is whether or not something is good for government is whether or not it's good for government.
Yeah, I mean, basic premise. You know what I'm saying? Like, yo, what is actually good for the country is what's good for the country. It's not what's good for, you know what I'm saying, like the political right to the country. Like, you can have countries, you know what I'm saying, with like they, you know, are basically ruled by dictators, and it still be a good fucking country. You know what I mean? As a whole, like the people can still live well. This has happened many and many a times in history, but like it's just, you know, I mean, a question of, you know, like what's actually good for the people. Is democracy a good idea? I don't really think that it is, at least universal democracy as far as things are concerned. I think you have to have some type of skin in the game in order to be able to have that type of power. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just in general.
Yeah, I mean, the whole idea of democracy and republics have originally started in ancient Greece, and so it was obviously intended for the Greek and Roman citizens, not for those who they happen to conquer.
Yeah, and fucking Ballistic Zero said in the chat, he said, ask Gaddafi. Oh, wait, you can't. Yeah, it's weird. You know what I'm saying? Like, yo, that fucking country was getting its shit together. And like, yo, we went through and just wrecked the shit out. I mean, like, they may have had some poverty, but like, yo, legit, they were the richest nation in Africa, which I think is like being the world's smartest retard. But, you know, it's neither here nor there. All right, let's get into this, my brother. This is the most awesome part of this fucking shit. Let's rock.
All right, let's start. The three paths in the forest. Latin is cool again. Here are three purposes of government as Latin phrases: vox populi, vox Dei, salus populi, suprema lex, and the luxus populi, suprema lex. Nobody ever said C, but the Latin is right, I think. Each of these mottos can easily be sold for the people. A is actually by the people, but that's okay. It never hurts to refute it in every mask it owns. Everyone swears that they believe in A. All modern public policy assumes C. The correct answer is B. Almost no one believes in B, and we're certainly not getting it either. B is also the historical norm answer so long as you zoom out far enough in history. B is even the state motto of Missouri. If Missouri took it seriously, Missouri would be a pretty different place. B should not be at all weird or surprising, and yet when we take it seriously, it is. B is the strange path we will take. But first, let's give A and C one last goodbye look. Vox populi, vox Dei. Vox populi, vox Dei. The definition of popular sovereignty. The voice of the people is the voice of God. Since God is always right, public opinion is always right. Since public opinion always wants the right thing, the public should always get what the public wants. Sounds a lot like the customer is always right bullshit. Well, okay. But was any doctrine more surely exploded by the 20th century than the belief that whatever the people, or a numerical majority of adults, want or like, must also be the right thing, which is also the best thing for them and everyone else? By the middle of the century, the world's intellectuals agreed that a civilized, educated population can be led dangerously astray and persuaded to want things that are very bad for themselves and others. We don't seem to have changed our minds on this. Anyone who is not a Nazi can agree that Hitler proves this point by example. Anyone who is a Nazi can point to FDR, Churchill, and Stalin. Perhaps future historians will end up pointing to all four, but they will hardly dispute the point. So, the modern system, in the second half of the 20th century, amended its principle to read, "The people are always right if rightly educated." Obviously, this rule is inconsistent with the principle of vox populi, vox Dei. Who educates a god? The amended rule is flawless, a tautology. Best of all, it needs the people not at all. Since the people are downstream of the teachers, power can work directly with the teachers. This helps keep random weirdos out of the building. It is also how our ancient republic inevitably evolved into a modern oligarchy. An immense and tutelary power. In the 20th century, we learned to assume that the people believe whatever they are taught. A teacher is any reliable source, anyone with a license to make trusted assertions. A teacher is a teacher. A professor is a teacher. A journalist is a teacher. And even some government officials may turn out to be teachers. And whomever controls these jobs controls public opinion. And ultimately, all politics is about one of two things: war or controlling jobs. If public opinion can be controlled by controlling jobs, the vox populi has one neck that any such power can compress. If all teachers must be licensed by the Enlightenment Ministry of Dr. Goebbels, public opinion will be Nazi opinion. If all teachers must be Catholics, the Virgin Mary will rise steadily in the polls. Controlling jobs, filtering who can get them, typically for some religious, cultural, ideological, or racial uniformity, is not just one kind of hack. It is a field, an art form. It is the great field of nonviolent politics. Politics is a human universal. It does not need to be centralized or directed. Just because you have no Ministry of Truth to hand out journalistic licenses does not mean power has not found a gentle way to squeeze the neck of your truth stream. For squeezing necks is what power does. It does something else, something worse. It strokes necks. Power knows how to take care of both its enemies and its friends. Power has a black belt in the stick, but its carrots win gold medals at the fair. Power need not hurt anyone itself. Power has made more than enough friends to handle its enemies. At a certain level, the system will even admit to this. It has to, and it can, because of its new 20th century version of vox populi. The people are always right, if rightly educated. Unfortunately, at the bottom of the argument, you find yourself agreeing with power, and your true faith is not even in a specific power, but, if consistent, in power itself. Your superficial principles are hypocritical. Underneath them is this: perfect as diamond. The two political temperaments are not about policies, only compliance. As a liberal, you may even feel the flash of realization that in Nazi Germany, a person like yourself would be a Nazi, just like someone would be just like someone like me would be a liberal. As Café wrote, "Chi fis il grand refuto." For some people, the day comes when they have to declare the great yes or the great no. It's clear at once who has the yes ready within him, and saying it, he goes from honor to honor, strong in his conviction. He who refuses does not repent. Ask again, he'd still say no, yet that no, the right no, drags him down all his life. Is that you, strong in your conviction? The wages of tautology. The fundamental assumption of democracy is that public opinion is an ultimate cause. Once public opinion is a consequence of some other cause, once it must be led and educated, vox populi, vox Dei is not even wrong. No voice can be the voice of God, and yet also the voice of the man behind the curtain. If the voice of the people does not even come from the people, if they are less speaking than spoken through, if the grassroots always turn out to be made of nylon, whatever party, institution, movement, or force does control this voice is, by pretending that the voice is both endogenous and exalted, pretending to be God. This is nothing unusual.
All right, let's break down this last section as a whole, right? So we had a conversation. He was standing here talking about vox populi, vox Dei, which is, the voice of the people is the voice of God. Like, how do y'all kind of feel about that as far as, you know what I'm saying, like the mentalities of what that is?
That makes sense as far as like what a lot of people talk about when they like worship democracy these days.
I mean, it's like as Renaud Negron says, it's that people are given this illusion that they do have a power and they do have a voice when it comes to influencing decisions. But that voice was basically could only be given by sanction to the government in the first place. The government let the people have the voice, and the people just go along with it. So the idea that the voice of people is the voice of God isn't really necessarily true, because 99% of the time, even in lore, it looks like God is usually against mankind, usually against the people. It's sort of like the majority is wrong. It's like the majority is always wrong.
You're not wrong, but like the idea that the people, should always have a voice when properly educated kind of leans a whole lot of power in, the institutions of teaching and media as a whole, right?
Yeah. I mean, even Plato proposed that if you educate people, that's make democracy work. But even Plato was against democracy.
I feel you. Yo, Neuro, how do you feel, man? If Neuro's even still here, you might have fell asleep on us.
No, I'm here. What is the exact? What aspect are we tackling now? What specifically?
Vox populi, vox Dei.
Like, how do you feel about the fact that, if the people are properly educated, they can make good decisions. But doesn't that lead to a lot of power in the hands of the teachers and the media?
So I think it's pretty complex. So yeah, there's no doubt that there are interest groups that direct the teachers, that push certain agendas into academia, into the elementary school K through 12, then into universities and such. And that same agenda is pushed through the media as well. But the question is, to me, whether it's conducive for a stronger unified nation or whether it's corrosive to the nation, right? And those people that are anti-establishment in this day and age, they tend to think it's corrosive. They say that this progressive agenda is decaying the fabric of society, that it's leading people astray, It's feminizing men. It's taking away, American ingenuity, the drive for excellence and power. But there might be things that are unseen to these critics, right? It could be that America is in competition globally with other nations, and our native, and when I say native, I don't mean the Native Americans, but those people, those the progeny of the colonists, right?
Those of us born on this soil and nowhere else.
Those born on the soil, but also the ancestors, also the descendants rather of the Europeans that kind of framed what America framed and built, or what America is today. Those people might not be reproducing at a quick enough rate. Okay. And if we're to stay competitive with Asia, Africa, even Eurasia, nations in Eurasia, we have to keep the populace up. We have to keep the GDP growing. We have to keep the markets growing. We have to increase industry. We have to, continue to build up infrastructure and continue to build up the military industrial complex. So part of this has been, one of the tools we use is immigration. So we bring in immigrants for a lot of reasons, for economic exploitation. That's what banks and corporations like to do. But the government, the government itself likes to use these people to add on to those other things, to add into the military, to create a larger tax-paying base with which to fuel, American excellence and foreign dominance, to, build up our industries, to have a larger labor force, so on and so forth. So when you have this diversity within the country, you have these immigrants coming in, it's no longer, a homogenous population. There needs to be a way to interlock the different subsets of that population so that the social strife that would emerge from racial and ethnic and religious diversity doesn't destroy the nation. So ultimately, if America's goal is to stay strong, to stay together, and to survive, the people have to work in unison for the same goals.
But what if it's not?
What I think a lot of the critics of progressivism miss is that it may not be the right way to do this. Certainly I disagree with a lot of aspects of social progressivism. But what I think they don't realize is progressivism as a tool is seeking to lock that diverse, heterogeneous population together so that the nation can survive as a whole.
Okay. I've got to counterpoint that. I have
wait a minute. Let me.
I'm not sure if any of that made sense, but if you understand,
it made perfect sense, right? I understand exactly.
It makes sense, right? But I disagree on a couple of different points.
Well, let me. Well, no, I completely agree with what you're saying, right? Like I understand your mentality. So let me say this: I don't think that we should be a country as a whole, right? I legitimately don't think that this should be a nation. I think that this should be a bunch of different nations, right? And I think that the idea that we should have progressivism or an ideology of where everybody should be taught how to, stand here and like deal with other immigrant groups and other cultures and other people should be something. I got you, Ballistic. It's appreciated, man. Don't worry. I handed him a wrench when he came in. Everybody gets a wrench in my chat. You know what I'm saying? Just so everybody knows, because like I don't want YouTube to shut you up or to hide your comments. Just to put that out. That's always our mentality here. Everybody gets free speech. I don't care what you say in the chat. It's your business. You do what you got to do. And it makes all of us better. And I love trolls too. You be a good troll, I will motherfucking put you in my Discord and you can be a moderator if you're good at it. Right?
Hey, that's the trick, though. You got to be good at it.
You got to be good at it. That's it. That's a secret, right? But my mentality is that I don't think we should all be taught the culture and the values of cosmopolitan elites. When you're an individual who lives, far away from the cosmopolitan elites. You know what I'm saying? When you live in an area where you have to struggle every winter to get by, you have to go out here, and shovel your snow and take care of your neighbors, and you have to sit here and be a community and be close with people who actually look like you. You know what I mean? It shouldn't be the ideology of like, oh man, we're going to teach you, you know what I'm saying, how to be, nice to immigrants and nice to other populations and disregard your cultures and your heritage and who you are. And make you feel bad about, like, yo, who the fuck made you, what type of people you came from. I think that's a shitty way to go about it. And I think that it completely disrespects, every man who came before you. And I'll be honest with you, I don't like the ideology of like, man, this is gonna make us cohesive. Like, no, how about like we only taking enough immigrants that, like it actually it's like our wages still go up, and housing prices go down.
And let me point out something real quick here too.
Well, before that point is lost, I just want to make this quick comment.
All right.
I agree with you there. All right, I'm a student of culture and history, and I agree with you. But by the same respect, does it really have any utilitarian use? Does diverse culture, tradition, these vestiges of the past, do they have any real utilitarian use in the progression of the larger organism, which is the United States in itself? Or does it just serve as some sort of archaic, vestige that we should have evolved past?
Yeah,
and that's the real
yes, because like, first of all, people who are in touch with their cultures don't fucking kill themselves.
Like, it allows you to live, right, as a whole. Yeah. It allows you to have, things that you can trade and add to the tapestry of humankind, rather than just being a brain dead consumer. And I think that's ultimately utilitarian at the end of the day. Like that's something that you should have. You should have individuals who are actually different, and not, people who are just different because, you brought them from somewhere else, and in 2 generations, they're going to end up just being, another brain dead consumer who buys more goods.
But again, I feel like you're centering on an individualistic, perspective. What's good for you? Maybe what's good for your community or your kin. You're not looking at the greater organism. You're not looking at what's better for the country. In that with that mentality. Yes, my culture is a Greek American is important, but does adhering to my culture and continuing to go to church, in Orthodoxy, is that better for the country? That's the question.
Yeah, because it makes you a better man.
It may make you a better man. It depends on what we mean by better, but will that help you to relate to the other, people within this diverse society? Does it help you to be a better patriot? Will it help you to sacrifice yourself for the greater organism that is the United States? When are we going to ask ourselves what's more important, the United States or individual, our individuality, or expressing our individual?
I think the argument that we're going back and forth on, are you going from top down or bottom up? Right, because I'm going from bottom up and you're going from top down, right? I'm saying like strong individuals make strong individuals make strong families, which make strong communities, which make strong states, which make strong nations, right? And and that's the mentality.
Wait, Tom. I addressed that when I said that the diversity will cause the social strife, which will weaken the greater organism.
Now, this is where I'm going to have to start chiming in and give my counterpoint on this one. Now, from what my understanding, Nero, is that what you said is that critics of progressivism do not understand bringing in immigration. Was that about it, or do you want to restate that for me so we're on the same page here?
No, I feel that some, not all, but some of the critics of progressivism don't understand what it's being used for.
Okay. That's
well, for one, demographic replacement, and 2, keeping labor costs down.
Demographic replacement is a conspiracy theory, in my opinion, because
it's been confirmed, dude. And
all right,
we can go into that later, but for now, let's just be honest.
Let me go back.
This has to be addressed now. This has to be addressed.
We are addressing it now. Let me go back.
Let me. Anyway, I can address it. Right, hang on, real quick. We'll address it. The upper crust of the country, guys like Bill Kristol, Hillary Clinton, individuals who make government policy literally said, yes, we would like to replace, these white working class Americans who are too expensive, right? Because immigrant labor cost us less money and Americans are lazy and fucking unproductive, flat out. That's been said.
That's not what I see. I see a segment of the population that's not able to reproduce at a fast enough rate to compete globally with the explosiveness of population growth elsewhere. So immigration is not a tool to replace, white European Americans, but to supplement or to increase or add to the population of native European.
Okay. Hang on a minute, my brother. All right. So y'all let me deal with Nero real quick, because like this is important to understand. All right. So where do you think the explosive population growth is happening elsewhere?
Well, I think now that China's industrializing and that they've stopped this one-child policy and that there is a burgeoning middle class, it stands to be that soon it could have an explosive population. It already has over 1 billion, whereas America has about 350 million.
All right. So let me hit you with these facts real quick, because I think you are undereducated on this fact. Right. Not, I think you're undereducated on this fact. By 2050, China's population will be half of what it is today.
All right. I don't think so. I don't think.
No. By every fucking metric, right? That's been measured by every demography individual. Their population will be half of what it is today.
They are just now starting to feel the effects of the one-child policy. It is long ago instituted. They got rid of it. It's too late. Like there's already how many men to one woman in China?
It's something like 2 to 1, something like at this point. But like here's the real problem. Most of their women are in a different fucking part of the country than the men are.
And the women are actually trying to get out.
They drug the women. They drug the women from the farm and put them over into the provinces where, they're over here working in factories, right? Because if you put 5 dudes inside of like a 1-bedroom apartment, you know what I mean? Like you're going to end up with a head in the freezer by like the end of the month. So understand something. No, China will have half the population it does by the year 2050. Japan is less than one child per woman. Taiwan, Korea, Vietnam, Indonesia, Kuwait. Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Turkey, all of Europe, most of South America, Mexico, all of Central America, Canada, the United States, and Russia are all in demographic decline. The only place in the world where they're having more than 2 kids per woman is in Africa, and that is going down dramatically every year. So what are you talking about explosive population?
I think that trend is going to change. Like I said,
Why would it change?
Because it's entering modernity, it's industrializing, and it's starting now to open up West. Western China was kind of closed off.
It's not.
Yes, it is. That's why there's a push for quote unquote re-education of the Uyghurs in Western China, because they're going to try to bring Western China into the whole of China and start populating and building up cities there. But also, a large part of China's depopulation, as you say, is probably also due to immigration of Chinese out of the country and expatriates finding work and properties outside the country.
It's okay. It's industrialization.
Even so, you're still looking at India, which is growing in population. Both China and India still have well over 1 billion. Now, once these countries are fully industrialized, then they're able to compete with the United States in terms of technology, military prowess, so on and so forth.
I'm not going to let that pass.
The United States is going to need a much larger population.
India is not fully industrialized.
And in order to compete with these people,
hang on a minute. All right. So here's the deal, right? This is important to understand. Like, we follow geopolitics and demographies very, very closely on this channel. Like, we do a lot of work on it, a ton of research. The reasons why you have low birth rates is because of industrialization. All right. It's because individuals move off the farms and into the cities. And inside of a city, when you have children, it's like having a St. Bernard in a 2-bedroom apartment. It's an expense. It's a luxury. It's not a fucking help like it is on a farm. That's why it is that most Chinese are not having any kids. That's why in America, like individuals in the suburbs have lots of kids. Like women in the suburbs on average have like 2.4 kids per woman. Women in the cities have like 1.1.
That's even if they have a romantic partner to begin with. Thanks, feminism.
Yeah.
Well, even so,
which is why I am saying we need to import
they're
them
still
women from China.
becoming more industrialized. There's still going to be a greater threat to America once their technological level increases.
That's gonna be a trip for them to even get there. They're still way behind.
All right. Then I'll ask you this: if the program, if progressiveness seeks to replace white European Americans, who's doing it and why?
See, now we're getting into the area where it starts to become conspiracy.
All right,
there's actually a grain of truth to it.
No, it's very simple. It's corporations, right? Like for instance, all right, so the meat packing industry, all right, it's happened, you know what I'm saying, in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s. The meat packing industry got tired of paying union black individuals down in the Carolinas. So what they did was they trucked in busloads of Mexicans, right? And when they trucked in busloads of Mexicans, they could break the unions and pay these individuals jack dick. And if they ever tried to unionize, they just call INS and send them on their fucking way. It's
not even Mexicans anymore. I've serviced ATMs inside of meat packing plants. We got fucking Africans in there now.
Oh yeah. Legit. That's what this is about. It has absolutely. I mean, like,
how will it benefit the United States on a global scale with its competitiveness globally if the population of whites are completely eradicated or replaced?
Because it's not that they're going to straight up eradicate the whites by going out and killing everybody and getting rid of it. That's not what's happening. They're going to breed them out.
All right, so if they breed out these whites, how is that going to benefit corporations in terms of
voting in the same policies?
I understand the cheap labor argument and the exploitation, and I agree that's a large part of immigration as well. But in terms of ingenuity, innovation, all of these things that white Americans have been engaging in far longer, immigrants obviously have to catch up. They're coming to the country. First and second generation have a lower LEP than Native Americans.
That's the problem.
So then why would they actively engage in something that they know is going to doom them for the future?
Because they're not going to be alive for that.
Yeah. They don't care.
Yeah. Duh. They don't care.
So you're telling me the establishment doesn't have any concerns beyond their natural lifespan, that they're literally every decision and policy is based on just that individual?
Atheists. Yes.
They're atheists and they're boomers.
Yeah, like you have to remember the vast majority of individuals making policy are like octogenarians.
So I think that has to be refined a little bit, that theory.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Here's what is happening. Okay. Those bigger the individuals in charge of the cathedral, they have no long-term plan. They don't plan for the long term. They always plan for the short term. All right. They don't.
How do you know this? How do you know this without? How do you know this for sure? How do you know?
Because it's about the next quarter's earnings.
I don't think they're that short-sighted. I don't think anybody. All right. First of all, the media is just an apparatus. It's not autonomous from it's not autocephalous or autonomous from the establishment. So they're just a tool that those in power use to indoctrinate the American populace. But those people, those policymakers, the real power brokers, why would they have such a narrow-sighted or short-sighted approach?
It's the same reason why they had no problem outsourcing jobs, right? It's because they don't do them.
No, see, and this is why I think the critics don't understand what progressivism is used as a tool for. Because I think there is a long-term plan. It's just that I think it's easier for us being discontent with the current system, and I am too. It's easier for us to take an oppositional mindset to what's going on instead of trying to figure out what exactly they are doing.
Well, you have to remember, number one, it's highly important to understand that there isn't anyone really in charge as a whole. That's kind of the whole mentality is that this is an oligarchy, right? The oligarchy operates in many different fashions and nobody's actually in charge of shit. It's all, kind of compartmentalized as far as things are concerned. So the idea that they want more fucking immigrants is the fact that they want cheaper and more compliant labor as a whole. That's
okay, but that would then be antithetical to the idea of to the very idea of a cathedral. If no one's in charge, if no one's pushing specific agendas, then there shouldn't be one, uniformic cathedral based on academia and media that's pushing any particular agenda. It would be pushing several opinions or agendas in several directions. But the fact that it is focusing on a single agenda, this progressivism, shows that there is some consolidation of power, at least in my opinion.
No, the idea of the cathedral, right, is like academia plus the media. So like there's like 7-8 colleges that set most of the academic ideologies in America, right? It's Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Georgetown, fucking Notre Dame, these type like fucking high league, Ivy League schools, right? And these colleges actually set the academic textbooks for the rest of the colleges and all the schools across the nation, right? Elementary, high schools, secondary, whatever it is, right? And so all of them, all the individuals who go to school get the same marching orders they're going to get, from the people who make them up in goddamn Harvard, right? And so the media and the government is about 10 to 15 years behind where academia is, because academia, is standing here rotating things out, but everything's moving in the same general direction. That's the idea of the cathedral as a whole. Right.
And here's where the thing is, and I'm going to need y'all to let me actually finish this thought.
Do you think, my brother? Do you think?
Yeah.
Sure. I'll be patient this time.
Yeah. Now, when I said that they're trying to breed the whites out, it's because they're trying to get rid of the whites able to think individually and make those innovations. What they want is they want a dumbed down mixed breed whose only job is just to labor and not think. That's what they're after. That's what we're talking about when we talk about demographic replacement.
It's a basic thing. And then AI and automation is going to take care of most of the fucking jobs that, they would have for middle management whites.
All right. So immigration, though, has been pushed long before AI was even, a thing, right? I mean, I'm assuming you all subscribe to, Kalergi and all that stuff, where he believed that the future was a mixed race or whatever.
Yeah, it started back in the 1960s.
It can't just be because they believe AI is going to take over the role of innovator and.
Well, no, now that's the mentality. Back in the 1960s, all right, so this goes back to Mark Blythe, right? Mark Blythe is an economist out of Brown University. He's a really, really bright guy. If you ever have a chance, read Angrynomics. Basically, the premise is this. So the United States has gone through basically like 4 shifts in its, public economic policy. And it's been a reboot of the software on the system, right? But like the basic hardware in the system still kind of remains the same. So the premise was we went from the gold standard to, the gold backed free floating currency to a free floating currency completely, right? And we had these things between like 1850 and like 1910 to 1940, 1970 beyond. Now, the reasons why these changes happened is because when we went off the gold standard under Richard Nixon, basically what happened is like at that point, the American labor market was so tight that they ended up having a guy could leave a job on, like Thursday and have a new job making more money by Friday, even if he was the most incompetent person at an operation. And in having this, the corporate individuals in this country basically threw a fucking revolt. And they said, look, we can't keep fucking doing this, because when it comes down to inflation and it comes down to the fact that we continue to have to pay more wages for individuals, we're losing money long term. Like if you make an investment, right, and you expect to get 5% returns and inflation's coming in at 6%, you're getting a negative 1% real return in the end of the day. And that's what was happening in the 1970s and 80s. So they threw a revolt and they said, look, we're going to start going overseas. We're going to stand here and put in these public policy individuals who allow us to have more immigration coming in. And this is really what all this was about. It wasn't just some, like civil rights movement as far as stuff was concerned. It was pushed by like the corporate ideologues of the day who wanted to have more individuals inside of the labor market able to compete so that they could have more workers. right? And they could have more people into the market as a whole, have more immigrants into the market as a whole. Problem is back then, you got to remember, the baby boomers in America are the only individuals who actually made like millennials as far as the Western world is concerned, right? Like Europeans didn't have kids the whole way back after, you know what I'm saying, fucking boomers were born. The boomers in that fucking Europe didn't have any kids because they had been industrializing since 1850, and all the people had already been moving to the cities and urbanizing.
All right. So I do agree that population decline is attached to the last stages of industrialization, but within the first stages, because technically the Industrial Revolution started in the 18th century. So we do see a population explosion. Yeah, we do see a population explosion from the 1700s into the mid 1800s, and then we started to see the decline afterward. And I think that other countries are just starting to enter a phase where they might, explode in population. Now I could be wrong, and maybe demographics show that currently China's in decline. Let me
hit you with this. You're right when it comes to places like Africa, right? Because industrial first hit the farming lands to be able to feed more people, but China has already passed this phase.
Well, I think only Hong Kong and some of the larger cities have. For the most part, most of China is undeveloped and still in the dark age, which is why I'm saying that they're trying to open up the West, which is part of the reason why they're trying to remove the Uyghurs, right, to consolidate control over the West, because they're afraid of irredentist and secessionist movements. But another thing to question, though, is why is it that it's only these countries that are sub 500 million are engaging in these immigration practices, and then other nations like India and China are embracing, the idea of homogeneity within the population, and actually aren't really taking any steps to diversify the population or bring in, a lot of immigrants. Within China's case, they do bring in highly specialized immigrants from the United States that can help, biomedical industry and science, but they're not taking in immigrants as a whole. And I think that has to do with the fact that they already have over 1 billion people that are soon going to be competing globally, because it is a globalized world now. The markets are globalized. Even the workforce, the labor force has become globalized. We see that with NAFTA. We see that with the worker visas within the EU. And we see that within a lot of Chinese immigrants coming to the U.S. to educate themselves, to gain experience in certain sectors within the U.S. And then they take all that education and experience back to China and help China out. So everything is becoming globalized. And I still see this immigration problem being only that of countries that are well under 500 million people, particularly certain countries in Europe like Germany or UK, or in the United States itself that is one of the largest countries in the world as far as land mass, but still only has about 350 million people.
Okay, so first of all,
okay, all right. Can we talk about the labor rates in China versus the rest of the world?
And who the fuck wants to move to China?
Biomedical, not many. I certainly wouldn't, but some biomedical researchers, like those Americans who are working at Wuhan and other technical institutes like that.
All right. So the cost of labor in China has gotten to the point where Mexico is cheaper than they are. Right. You know what I mean? Everybody but Apple and Hewlett Packard, for the most part, have fucking left China. Right. Everybody is making plans to leave China and reshore shit because their fucking population has become to the point where it's too expensive to keep going. And on top of that, the fact that a lot of their population is over the age of 50 at this point. They're actually older than Americans are, technically. You know, I mean, I think the average age of an American is 38. The average age of a Chinese person is fucking 42 or something like that at this point. You know, I mean, so again, China's aging into obsolescence. Again, by the year 2050, China's population will be half of what it is today.
Yeah, but all right. So there's so many points there. All right. So China's labor is probably just under $6, but Mexico is close behind, also increasing its hourly wages, where it's just under $6. So I mean, just under $5. So you probably have, maybe like $5.85 in China per hour by average, maybe $4.85 in Mexico. And I agree, American companies or manufacturers particularly are going to move out of China probably into India. They have been for the last 15 years, and into countries in Southeast Asia like Vietnam and those countries. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there won't be Chinese companies coming right behind them on their heels to fill up the void left by American companies. And we're seeing that with a lot of Chinese.
Mexico,
China has to sell its goods here because it can't consume them.
Yes, but the hourly wages in Mexico are close behind China. They're increasing as well. So whereas China hourly wages are probably just under $6, Mexico's are now just under $5, only about a dollar cheaper.
And the energy prices in Mexico are going down, and the energy prices in China are going up.
But I'm sure the energy prices in Mexico will go up eventually. Mexico is no doubt a better deal just because of the fuel cost in shipping products from China. But that doesn't mean that Mexico's labor force can handle the kind of technical jobs and the manufacturing that China does.
China doesn't do technical manufacturing.
Yeah, they do. They're one of the largest producers of microprocessors in the world.
No, that's Taiwan.
No. It's also China. It's also China.
China makes a dog shit ones.
Yeah, China does make lesser quality, but most of the motherboards that you have right now on your computer, in fact, I would say 90% of all the components in your phone and computer are made in China, not Mexico, not Malaysia. Used to be Malaysia, but not anymore.
No, now they're made. Most of that's made in like either Taiwan or Vietnam at this point. They've moved out of China.
Well, no, I think the simpler stuff. So toys, clothing, these things are moving to India and Vietnam. But no.
The cheap stuff is in China. The better grade stuff is in
Taiwan. An easy way to figure that out is just to go on a Newegg and look at all the motherboard companies. Microstar, Asus, all this stuff is still made in China.
Let's be
with the exception of graphics
real.
Chips, which are made in Canada.
Yeah,
no. Let's be 100% real here. There's a difference between assembled in China and made in China. China imports all of the actual chips and all of the silicon in a lot of cases, and then they just have people who are taking by hand and soldering all of these chips and all of these wires into place for the various computer components. That's just how it ends up happening, because you need, like, for these chips, for the actual packages and stuff, you just need human hands and eyes on stuff. Yeah, you need mechanical assistance like microscopes and specific like soldering tools and this type of thing, but you need hands and eyes on assembling these actual electronics, and that's where China shines. They have a large amount of like that medium skill labor where they just get to put everything together. But that doesn't mean that all of the high-end stuff is made in China. All of that is made in Taiwan or in the various Asian countries around there. That's
all right,
not
so I think in the past, in the past, IBM had its factories in Malaysia, and United States, of course, is having a lot of this stuff made in Taiwan. But I think I read just a few months ago, within 1 year, design, not just manufacturing, but design, manufacturing, and assembly increased in China by well over 50%. And just the manufacturing of microprocessors alone, the design and manufacturing of processors alone in China increased by 38 or 39. Wait, this is important.
I understand you're talking
wait, please.
I know exactly what I'm talking about.
It increased by 39% just in 1 year. Just in 1 year.
Wait.
And that's why you see the emergence of companies like Huawei in China that are now manufacturing phones, computers. In fact, China has its own several lines of x86 chips now that are being used in computers and netbooks all over the world.
Yeah, well, like what they're doing is they've increased their share because we've stood here and started making like smart spatulas, right? Like we're putting semiconductors in like fucking coffee pots. Like this is what they're increasing. That's what they're picking up. It's the fucking garbage.
I mean, that's debatable. As far as quality, is it going to be as good as an Intel? Intel quality has been diving, the last couple of years. while
And-
Chinese
and-
quality has been increasing.
And again,
But there is
we're
also a
onshoring-
fight
we're
for
onshoring
silicon,
a
and
lot
we
of
know
that too.
we know that there's a all right. So there's a huge fight right now between the United States and China. You were way off topic. I'm sorry. We're way off.
I
You guys
told you.
wanna go back
I love the weeds. I love the weeds.
Okay,
Like I told you.
so there is a war right now between the U.S. and China over silicon wafers and the things needed to build these microprocessors, and that's because America fears the growing of that tech industry in China and the manufacturing of those chips in China, and that's also now why China is starting to get a little more bulldogish with Taiwan because it wants to eliminate future competition. It wants to corner the market, so to speak, on all of these things. China is also pretty
same as they
advanced.
did with like Singapore and Hong Kong and shit. I mean, that's why they want to like absorb that. So like the mentality is
Singapore
that,
already is kind of a satellite of China, I would say.
right. I feel you. We're like the thing is we're onshoring a lot of shit right now. Right. Like they're opening I think like 5 new fucking microprocessor plants in fucking America.
Yeah.
Right at the moment, because like we're tired of fucking like having to deal with China, and China's getting to be too expensive, and they're stealing too much shit.
Yeah.
TSMC bought something stupid like 100 acres of land in Arizona.
Yeah, and that's probably for all of the chip manufacturing and such. And I think it's because the United States is afraid. It's afraid of what's going on in China right now with regard to how quickly they're growing.
No. It's not about that. It's legitimately it's not about that though, right? What it's about is motherfucking stupid piece of shit ass thing, right? What it's about is us standing here like ending the U.S. global order. I mean, that's ending. Like we're not going to be protecting like everybody's fucking shipping across the whole world.
I think that's a part of it too. I agree with that. I do see that as well.
So like we're moving everything back home because like the United States is no longer interested in standing here going through all this nonsense and shit.
Yeah. Well, no, that is a part of it too. That's a part of it too. But I mean, and why is that power eroding? That's another question because we see China outmaneuvering us in Africa. We see China with the Belt and Road Initiative.
That's not it. That's all right. So here's the mentality.
To me, it is it. To me, it is. In fact, China's already made deals with the Taliban 4 months ago. They already knew the Taliban was going to take over Kabul as soon as the Americans left. And why are they making that deal? Because Taliban is the Afghanistan is the hub for oil distribution, even though it's not a major oil producer itself. Its pipelines and its geolocation is strategic for oil distribution all around Eurasia. And they want to move the Belt and Road Initiative right through Afghanistan, through Iran, through that, Eurasia into Europe and funnel all of these goods that they're producing now that they're going to stand to produce because they've also gotten into the automobile industry, right? So they want to start pushing all of this stuff into Europe and cut America off at the knees.
Well, all right. So here's the issue. All right. So the United States, and like I've been through this on my channel, so everybody kind of already understands this, but I'll break it down for you. All right. So the Bretton Woods Agreement is dying, right? The reason why it's dying is because like it was a war agreement. I mean, the reason why we protected the world's trade was for, like war purposes. It was for security. It had nothing to do with economics. Like the ideology of free trade across the world, is like it was never good for us. It was never an economic policy. Like that's the reason why like we are we like as a percentage of GDP, we are the lowest in the world, right? When it comes to like being tied to other countries, right? Like fucking like I think it's like Burkina Faso is the only country that trades less than we do. So we really, like don't need the fucking rest of the world. We're going back to isolationism.
Yeah,
right? And
I don't agree with that at all. I don't think that's gonna ever happen.
Okay. So here's the mentality. Like here's what it is. So we stood here and held up the world. You know what I'm saying? As long as like as far as like protecting sea lanes and standing here, fucking making sure that everybody had the opportunity to trade everywhere. It was a policy to fight the USSR. It was not a policy for us economically. Like legitimately, like we are the country who is the least involved in the rest of the goddamn world. Like short of fucking Burkina Faso. Legit. That's the truth. Our largest trading partner is not China, it's Mexico.
It depends on what area of exports you're talking about.
No,
there is
period.
trade. There is trade deficits, but we take in immense amounts of natural resources from all over the world. We trade oil from all over the world. We buy We have products manufactured cheaply all over the world to bring it into the American consumer base. And as far as manufacturing, our modern our manufacturing sector is based on something known as PPF, production possibilities frontier. And what that means is the United States feels that it's better and more efficient to focus on fewer things, manufacturing fewer things, than trying to manufacture everything. And that's a model that we've, adopted and we've sustained for quite a long time. I don't see any trends showing that we're going to change that. So I don't think we're ever going to completely become isolationist, because then that would mean we'd have to produce everything that we consume, which the United States just doesn't agree. It's never adopted that sort of mentality. Markets in the United States have never believed that to be the efficient way. They would rather have things made offshore, bring them into the US, and then have, the consumers consume and have those components made with other things and such. So in order to become isolationist, we have to totally change the way that we have developed our manufacturing center. And we have to start manufacturing all these goods that we have manufactured in India, Taiwan, China, Vietnam, Canada, Mexico, now also Slovenia, Poland, Greece. And I just, I don't see that happening necessarily.
Right. And I'm gonna show you this, right? Because this is important to understand, right? Fucking like, hang on, because like this is some shit that, like you may not be aware of, right? This here is United States' share of GDP. It's 11%, right? Is our share of trade per GDP, right? It's one of the lowest in the world. We don't trade with the rest of the world. We really don't. Like the idea that like our whole, like the reason why we have our country open to everybody else is because of the fact that like we wanted to stand here and have them fight the Russians for us. That's what it was about. And that order just has been running on basically fucking it's been running on, like momentum since the fall of the fucking Berlin Wall. Right? Because like when George Bush, senior stood here and said, hey, look, we should sit here and, like fucking have a new world order. We fucking kicked him the fuck out of the presidency and brought in Bill Clinton, who was a domestic president. Then George Bush, who was a domestic president. Then fucking Obama, who was a domestic president. And then Trump, who had a fucking trade policy, but like the fucking whole world fought against it. Right? Because he wasn't, dealing with domestic shit. And then Joe Biden, who was a domestic renewal president. Like we've been doing this for like the past 20 years. And we haven't adjusted our trade policy to match, our actual security policy. We don't trade with the rest of the world. It's like the way everybody else does. We don't do exports. We just don't. We don't need the rest of the world. Like we're going to have shit manufactured here. Like shit is moving back here by the fucking boatloads. We're actually moving stuff back from India at this point. Like not just from China, from India.
All right, so the domestic all right, so I agree that our exports are low. That's what I've been saying all along, because we have things exported elsewhere. I mean, our exports are low because we have things manufactured elsewhere, so we import. But that's where our connection to globalism lies. So if we're at 11% export, that's a direct, maybe not a direct, but that's sort of, there should be a correlation there between the low percentage export to GDP percentage and the manufacturing prowess of the U.S. The fact that it's low shows that at the moment, the U.S. isn't manufacturing all that much. We're importing everything. And that's where I think the disconnect lies. I don't think we're in a place right now to become isolationist because we import so heavily. But again,
we consume here, right? That's the thing. We're the largest consumer market in the world, and we're the only consumer market with a decent demographic.
75% of the world's goods. I agree with that.
Right, and we're still 47%, something like that, right?
40. Oh, you mean in consumption?
Right.
Yeah, it's got to be high. It's got to be high.
Yeah,
I agree with you.
We're ridiculously high as far as things concerned. But the thing is that we consume here.
Yes.
We consume shit here. So like anything we manufacture here will be consumed here.
Yes. And it would be better and more efficient and better for the American labor force if we built everything here. Yeah. But although I agree that they're moving. So they're, when it comes to that high tech stuff, they're going to start moving that stuff to the U.S. I don't think they'll be able to move everything to the U.S. again because they adopt this idea of production possibilities frontier, or what they consider lesser is more. So when they look at the manufacturing sector of the U.S., they want to manufacture less goods more efficiently, better quality, as opposed to trying to manufacture everything and spread out the manufacturing force or labor force. And then you'd have to, everything would kind of get discombobulated. You'd have this huge, bureaucracy involved, and it would just, I just don't see that happening in the U.S. I see the U.S. as becoming a rentier economy that continues to import, crude materials, raw materials, that manufactures high-tech goods, but still imports everything else.
All right. For instance, Justin Kuhn in the chat just said it's costing Walmart $23,000 per container to import currently. They've been trying for years to get fucking American manufacturing back online, and they're finally they're being successful at it. And you understand what desourcing is by chance? Do you know what desourcing is? There's outsourcing, insourcing. You know what desourcing is?
I'm not familiar with desourcing though.
All right. So desourcing is what Japan and Korea do. Right. Basically, what you do is you pick up your manufacturing base because of the fact that you have a population that's literally shrinking at this point. Right. Japan is having less than one child per woman and Korea is having less than one child per woman. You take your manufacturing base and you put it where consumers are. Right. So the largest Honda plant, right, in the world is in Kentucky. Right. You know what I'm saying? The largest Japanese manufacturers are in Kentucky and Texas and fucking Michigan. Mm-hmm. Right. You know what I mean? So they're not they pick up their manufacturing and they put it here and then they send their tax dollars back home to continue to try and fucking pay their fucking social benefits and shit for their people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So understand, they're not manufacturing overseas anymore. It's just not going to happen because it doesn't make any sense.
So if you have foreign nations setting up manufacturing centers here, then that's still part of globalization.
Well, it's really not because they're not fucking manufacturing anything there, right? They can't really fucking export because they don't have manufacturing capability because they don't have any fucking people, right? There's not going to be a whole lot of globalization. We're going to have a couple of countries we deal with Britain, Japan, Australia, goddamn fucking Korea, maybe Mexico and Canada. We've really told Canada to go fuck themselves with this goddamn. We're still dealing with them, back and forth for wood and cheese and things of this nature, but they're not providing a lot for us anymore because they're competing with us for fucking labor instead of being, a fucking partner. They had the same type of fucking manufacturing base that we do, high end, design shit, because they're fucking all old.
Wait, what's old?
Canada's people.
So they're too old, you're saying, to manufacture?
Yeah, they don't have a labor force to do fucking lower end manufacturing. They can only do high end, so they're competing directly with Americans.
So what is the average age in Canada right now?
I want to say, somebody look it up for me. It's fucking somewhere in the 40s.
What are we looking for?
And is it that different than the United States? What would the average, I would guess around 42 for the US, 42 to 45, right?
Well, the average Canadian is 41. The average American is 37 or 38. That's a big difference. Right. Americans' average age. Yeah, 38.
So that might actually support part of why they're so attached to immigration. If they can keep the average age of the Americans down by bringing in younger people to the labor force, that would actually fit in with that.
Yeah, Canada can't attract that many people.
Well, yeah, not Canada, but the U.S. has, and that could be why right now our average age is lower than Canada. That could be another reason for bringing in these immigrants is to lower the average age for the labor force.
Well, and again, of rural Americans and Americans outside of a city is they have kids. Like the largest population growth in America right now is white people. It's not Mexicans. It's not fucking Saudi Arabians. It's not fucking Africans. The largest growing demographic in America is fucking Amish people. Legit.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So, ad hoc, you want to continue banging on this fucking thing? I think we fucking as far as we get in this conversation. All right.
Good thing I fucking saved
let's keep
this
rocking.
shit. All right.
Let's keep rocking.
So let's say last thing we do is we were talking about people pretending to be God. This is apparently nothing unusual. Most regimes pretend to be at least inspired by God. Many even pretend to be descended from God. Is vox populi, vox dei less rational? But God never speaks directly. When we grant sovereignty to public opinion, we grant sovereignty to the teachers, the persuasive institutions that manage public opinion. This is no different from granting sovereignty to the army, church, or king, unless public opinion is an ultimate self-governing, self-creating cause beyond the power of any other power to manage or regulate. Popular sovereignty cannot substantively exist. The paradox of public opinion is that if public opinion is irrelevant, suppose absolute power, both real and formal, is in the hands of the king and army. Jock Chad boneheads to a man. No power has an incentive to coerce or seduce public opinion. No power has any reason to compel the public mind. So the public mind is effortlessly independent. It is only cause of its own opinions. It has to be ruled by boneheads, though. But public opinion, under a constitution, in which the sovereignty of the public is real, formal, or both, becomes a megaphone of power, a sacred conch, which is the prey of every party with any motive to speak through it. Rather than an infinite wellspring of fair and impartial philosophy, it is a blade which the strong wield and the weak suffer. The prerequisite for democracy. Yet, in some cases, we know democracy actually works. In some cases, we know it is a tool for public opinion to control the state, not for the state to control public opinion. There is supposed to be a valve so that power only flows in the proper direction. But a valve is always a tricky little moving part. What determines the real direction of flow? If we could only start controlling the state again, we might even learn to control it well. Suppose a legitimate and sovereign public was a legitimate and sovereign king. We know that kings, even dynasties, can go from power's masters to power's creature. We know that Elizabeth II has the same title on her business cards as Elizabeth I. A monarch cannot be a true and absolute monarch, full master of the state, without A, the unshakable will to rule, and B, total confidence in the ability to rule. Any glitch in or confidence can turn any monarch into a headless body or royal celebrity. Equally irreversible conditions. We can generalize this by saying that no regime can rule unless that regime is strong. The historical birth of democracy, both in the Greek world and in the English world, was not a consequence of democratic philosophy, but rather of popular strength, if that word can bear the marriage of determination and ability. We see that early in a democratic period, the real power of democracy, the power of the mob, greatly exceeds its formal power. Late in the cycle, this disparity inverts. The formal power of democracy exceeds its real power. Its peaceful, apathetic voters are not only a not mob, they are not even a crowd. These last men are too soft to even lift the swords of the primitive and violent ancestors who created their powers. So, those powers must and will be taken from them. In a monarchy where the king is weak, the king will be managed. In a democracy where the voters are weak, the voters will be managed. In no such country can vox populi be vox dei. God is not managed. It is impossible for any weak party, person, or population to truly rule. As Tocqueville wrote, no form or contribution of social policy has yet been devised to make an energetic people out of a community of pusillanimous and enfeebled citizens. This is why FDR cannot be charged with the murder of American democracy any more than Caesar can be charged with the murder of the Roman Republic. In both cases, we see a regime no longer capable of managing its country. We should not hope to see such a regime restored. Time does not reverse. We should hope to see its replacement, itself nearing the end of fate's thread, itself so cleanly replaced. A democracy in which public opinion is formally sovereign but lacks the will or capacity is a bit like a monarchy in which the king is formally sovereign but 8 years old. The big difference is that 8-year-olds grow up, a trend that any sharp careerist in the civil service is wise to anticipate. This inevitability makes a temporary regency inherently temporary. In the long run, the king is still the king. But for now, no nation has ever actually been ruled by a child, and none ever will be. But it is the lack of will and confidence in modern America in any sense of a consequence of a long-term decline in public virtue. The trend is in the opposite direction. America is not like a child. America is like a grown-up man with the mind of a child. The child will grow up. The man is growing down. Your people, said Alexander Hamilton. Your people, sir. Your people is a great beast. Hamilton was right, but a great beast has will and capacity. Hamilton was right today. Hamilton would not be right. He would look at us, even our riots, and see a petty worm. Next to his 18th century beast, the 21st century democracy is a sea cucumber. Once a wild animal, it has since evolved to become a sessile quasi-vegetable without will or capacity. Any vegetable has a farmer. To empower it is to empower the farmer. Its voice is the voice of that farmer. This hollow and passive ventriloquism is the last stage of many a regime.
Anybody want to discuss that at all?
I mean, when you think about it, a lot of people these days are basically just consumers. So he's actually on point on this one. Is that even most riots today, most people, end of the day, most of those rioters, say in Portland, Oregon, or hell, even in the Patriot riots, they just want to go back home, chill on Netflix and chill, not actually make a change.
I think Peter Zehan had it right. Like even all the last year when like you saw all of those riots and crazy shit going on, at no point during last year was there any more than like 15,000 people rioting at any given fucking time in America.
Yeah, because most people would rather just go to work or Netflix and chill.
You know what I mean? Neuro, you got anything to add to this, my brother?
Sorry, I missed some of it because I got disconnected. I was trying to look up births.
Cool. It's cool.
So yeah, it's true that the whites are still responsible for most of the population growth, but that seems to be because they're still outnumbering the others. But as far as fertility rates and birth rates, right now Hispanics are well over whites in that. So it is Hispanics and immigration that are adding the largest gains.
The Amish are having like 5 kids per woman in America. The Amish
are
the
Amish are
2.8.
Small. Yeah, they're such a small subset though.
Well, they're
anyway,
they're growing heavily here. Like it's ridiculous. But yeah,
that's why I got disconnected. But
cool.
What was it now? What was the current thing?
Like fucking like how the American people, you know what I'm saying, has kind of lost the will for political energy as a whole.
To truly rule, you need both the will and the capacity to do so. You have to want to rule, and you have to have confidence in your rule. We don't have that anymore.
No.
I mean, I'm thinking. I think that's debatable too. I mean, we see a lot of activism, right? Wouldn't that constitute a political will for change?
No.
Yeah, but
I would say
like last year, even with all the activism and the riots with the BLM and George Floyd and shit, at no point in the country on any given day was any more than like 15,000 people on the streets.
Like, think of it this way. When we say that it's ruled by mob rule, that mob is effectively headless. It just goes around doing what it does. Case in point, there was a riot of activism. I think it was the BLM activism one time.
Yeah.
They decided to get together and just go rioting because in sort of BLM. But then they got onto the streets and they were like, okay, well, where do we go? Let's go to the police station. Yeah, they all go down to the police station. Nobody bothers them. Nobody does anything. The police don't even bother to come out and engage them. Where they're like, well, okay, I guess we're not getting attention. Well, what should we do this time? I don't know. Should we go on the highway and through the cars? And then they all kind of mindlessly wandered onto the highway. They still weren't getting much attention, and they were kind of like, well, fuck, what should we do? And then half of them just wandered off back home. A whole bunch of people just scattered to the wind, and nothing really happened. Sure, they were marching around being angry, waving signs and everywhere, but the thing is that the community was so apathetic and didn't give a shit that they kind of just lost their will and lost their way. They kind of petered out.
All right. Go ahead, Nero.
So, all right. I don't, that's kind of anecdotal, but
not anecdotal.
Yeah. So what you're talking about is some specific, I guess, riot or something where people or something. I don't know. But as far as what we see today, and compare that to what we saw in the '60s, compare that to what we saw in the '20s.
The shit we have today doesn't even compare.
All right, so I think it does. I think you see about the same level of activism, the same level of concern. Maybe they're misguided. Maybe what these people are fighting for is misguided. We saw people storm the Capitol, this year, right?
Okay.
I wouldn't say that people are less of a political will for change. I would say that there are more extremists today, and others that are more disillusioned by the voting process itself, but I don't think the desire for change is any less, and I don't think the level of activism is necessarily.
Right. Okay.
I think it's remained constant. Right. And as far as like the headless mob, that's just a human condition.
Well, all right. Well, here's the thing. Like, it's a percentage. It's like it's a percentage of the population is what I'm saying, right? So, like, when you're talking about, like numbers wise, right? Like back in the '60s, like you had millions of people on the streets, right? Like millions. Like you had like a 1 million man march, right? And today, like when they stood here and had what's that shit called? Oh, when they stood here and they had that insurrection at the Capitol, that was 5,000 people. Compared to 350 million who live here now. It's about percentages.
Yeah, that's not even close to the entire population of America. I was like, what the hell?
No,
that's what I'm saying.
On top of that, the thing is that all those activist revolutions, they had staying power. They had people that would go to the head, make decisions, and everybody would be following them. And then those people at the head, when they said do something, everybody marched. You don't have that in today's riots. Can you actually name a leader in any of these riots that are going on today?
Well, I think the riots have become decentralized because the American establishment and the intelligence community goes after those who spearhead movements now. So even with the OWS movement in 2010-11, they went after specific leaders. We saw what happened in the 60s. They killed King, Malcolm X, JFK, and Medgar Evers, whole other bunch of people. So I think it's evolved over time, and they understand that a decentralized approach might be longer lasting, and the government would be less able to infiltrate, subvert, or destroy the movement by assassinating leaders.
Nope.
As far as the riots, in the 60s you had the 1 million man march, but that doesn't necessarily mean there were 1 million people there. I don't know how many people were there exactly, but you have to realize there's a media blackout too as to what's going on, because in 2018 and 19, I was watching Antifa riots almost daily on Periscope that were not broadcasted on any mainstream media news, not picked up by the world press, not picked up by any print media in the United States. And then we get this idea that, people aren't pissed off, or everybody's kind of, maybe they want to present the idea of complacency and laziness and perpetuate the idea so other people that would be activists or would be politically motivated won't feel guilty about sitting on their couch and being addicted to video games.
That's what we're talking about here, actually. It's so apathetic. It has no direction. It has no will. As
far as what I've come in contact, and this is going to be anecdotal, right? This is my anecdotal thing now. As far as what I've come into contact with, though, far more people are talking politics and are enraged in politics than I remember when I was a kid in the early 2000s. Far more people now are screaming the emergence of the alt-right, grass movements, even, like the Occupy Wall Street, BLM, and then other stuff even before that, like the Tea Party. All of this stuff is kind of like It could happen in cycles. Maybe it's not as big as it was in the 60s, but certainly through the latter 70s, 80s, and 90s, people were I would think, far less politically active than they are now in the 2010s and 20s.
Well, the problem, again, like the problem is the numbers, right? Like the numbers don't lie. You know what I mean? Like the amount of individuals who were on the street actually rioting, you know what I mean, throughout the year, like whatever.
So are you getting these numbers from academia and the cathedral?
No. I'm getting these numbers from like geopolitics individuals, like people who actually study like what's going on inside of like the social and political movement so that they can move businesses.
So academia, you're getting them from academia.
No. I'm getting them from like people who actually direct where corporations invest money. That's where I get my numbers from, right? I follow the money. I think it's important. Like if you're going to invest, you know what I'm saying, you want to get good, solid, you know what I mean, decent, you know what I mean, actual information. And that's where I get my information from, because I think it's important to stand here and actually have like real numbers. So the amount of individuals who stand here who were actually on the streets rioting throughout the past, you know, decade, whatever it was, is so much lower than it was in the 1960s or 1920s or 1860s or whatever it is. Like as far as percentage of the population, it's that, you know, we have become much more, you know, I mean, fucking complacent as far as stuff is concerned.
I don't know. I mean, I find that hard to believe, especially since the 1920s, we were maybe 86 million in the country. Now we're what, 370 million? So I find it hard to believe that they're far less politically active and motivated people than there were in the 1920s.
It is
the
not
60s, perhaps. I think it was 67 we hit 200 million. And I know that was probably the highest point of political activism in the United States because of the civil rights movement and everything that was going on, including the assassinations. But I still think we're pretty politically active in, you know, as of the last 10, 15 years as compared to the 80s, late 70s, 80s, 90s.
Like I'm saying, okay, so 80s, 90s for sure, right? Because things were like really peaceful at that point. You know what I'm saying? Like America was kind of like doing pretty well. You know what I mean? Especially like during the tech boom, you know what I mean? And like the, you know, fucking the booming 80s, you know, with Coke and disco, whatever it is, right? You know, but as of right now, like, yes, there's a lot of people who are much more politically active than when we were growing up. But as far as, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, Brian, like I was sitting thinking, like, what about, like you said, like a largest insurance event that's ever taken place? Like, what about Katrina? Like, they're going to wreck an entire city. Like, I feel like that was a larger insurance event. Right. But, you know what I mean? Like, I like legitimately, I feel like, you know, like them standing here saying that it's complete and utter horseshit. Sorry, I addressed my voice in the chat. Right. And that's kind of the mentality of the percentage of the population. Like, you know, you say like 10% of the population started the Civil War. 10% of the population wasn't on the streets this year.
Okay.
Where was
last year, yeah. I really never, all right, so I don't have the statistics in front of me. It's hard to get them because I'm on a phone. I didn't look this stuff up. I didn't even know exactly what we're going to talk about. I'll take your word for it that far less than 10% of the population was engaging in activism. And I do agree. I mean, there's no doubt that far less people are voting, at least percentage-wise, right? But that could also just be, you know, disillusionment with the system. I think people are starting to think that, fuck, my vote doesn't matter. And again, with the BLM, I mean, it could be because of the COVID pandemic. It could be because it could be several things. I mean, we don't really know for sure. We don't really know for sure why, you know, there weren't as many as there were. But I do think there's a media blackout on a lot of stuff. You know, people forget the WTO riots in the Pacific. I mean, we were all probably too young for that, but they were burning cities down then, you know, in Seattle and Portland and other cities there when they were protesting that stuff. And that happened, I think, I don't know how many years ago I read about it. But this idea that people aren't politically motivated, I don't see. I mean, even on Discord, right? When in the server, you're seeing these highly charged 12 and 13-year-olds. And when I was 12 and 13, nobody cared about these social issues or political issues. You know, we weren't defining ourselves according to which political ideology we aligned with. We weren't saying we were center-right, center-left, libertarian, neoliberal, whatever. But it's gotten to the point where now 11 and 12-year-olds are identifying according to their political ideologies, you know, and what they think they believe in or what they've been indoctrinated to believe in, Whereas like 20 years ago, I think people were just listening to rock and roll, starting to first discover video games and worrying about, their high school dates and their sports teams.
All right. Well, part of that is
this is also
on top of that,
because
we have the internet now. You know what I'm saying? And we're all interconnected, and you have an ability to get to it. And we didn't have that back in the day.
Yeah, that's true. That could be, that's another weird thing is how could we have the internet with all this information accessible at our fingertips and people not be more charged, with conspiracy theories, political ideologies, and
I think that's political algorithm, but as far as like actual political activity, I'm not talking about like us just standing here talking about this online, right? Yes, of course, that's super high. But on the same point, like, politics have always been discussed at like the dinner table or, around somebody's fucking barbershop or whatever it is, whenever you had the opportunity to do that. It wasn't positive. You weren't allowed to do it at work, or you weren't allowed to do that shit in, fucking like a bar or whatever it is. It's been frowned upon for years when you do that. But on the same point, like fucking, I'm talking about individuals in the street actually fucking rioting and like being charged. Like being politically charged and fucking like ready to fucking handle business. It's a much lower percentage than it's ever been. You know what I mean?
I don't know. I think it happens in cycles. I think the last great cycle is the civil rights. I think this cycle is just getting started. And I'm going to go so far as to say that the same way in 2001, people thought this war on terrorism was going to be, just a few years. We were going to somehow win. It was going to be over. We've come to learn that terrorism now is a staple of our lives. It's never going to go away. It's going to be a constant threat, something that's going to be perpetual. And I'm seeing the same thing with riots and dissension, and civil disobedience. I think it's going to become the norm, both in Europe and the United States. I think we're going to see riots every year. Whether or not the news publicizes it is a different story. And we've seen several fascist and then counter-fascist and progressive movements all pop up and engage in violence to try to promote their ideology through violence and harsh rhetoric, as opposed to what they were doing maybe in the 90s and 80s, when it was almost solely in the care of scholars at that point. It was the scholars that kind of propagated different ideologies back then. And now you're seeing, like I said, 12 and 13-year-olds propagate communism, call for fascism, neo-fascism, ethnocentrism, isolationism. These are things now that even teenagers are engaging in. And the whole cancel culture of the internet is a direct attempt to try to snuff it out, because I think the establishment is so afraid of how politically charged the people are. And you could be right, and I could be wrong, but it could also be that the government wants us to think that nobody gives a fuck and that nobody cares and that we're all alone and separated.
Well, on top of that, like if you look at the 60s and 70s and shit, we can talk about the Weather Underground, you know what I mean, or the Black Panther Party, or all like the left-wing terrorists that existed back then. And even in the 80s and 90s, you still had people like PETA and fucking whatever out here, like dragging dogs off of fucking porches and killing them, and letting motherfuckers free and bombing facilities. This has been a normal thing. But yeah, ad hoc, let's keep rocking, man. Like we are not fucking anywhere near through this goddamn article.
We're like a fifth of the way through. Y'all took too long on that last one. All right, moving on. Autocracy is the absence of democracy. If public opinion is not an ultimate cause, all governments are autocracies, granting absolute power to some arbitrary, contingent, and unaccountable institution, which is deemed spiritually pure and infallible, but which does not include the whole public. It's a big club and you're not in it. Autocracy literally means oligarchy or monarchy, the absence of converse of democracy. In a policy which democracy is effectively impossible, there is no case for autocracy. The trial is only between oligarchy and monarchy. But in your mind, autocracy just means monarchy. This may seem like a semantic nitpick. It is a semantic security hole. It's how democracy died without you noticing. You assumed that democracy meant the absence of autocracy, which is true. Then you equated autocracy with monarchy, which is false. Then you didn't see a monarchy, so you assumed you had finished checking for autocracy and clicked OK. It's a good thing you're not guarding like jewels or something. If an oligarchy manages public opinion is managed just the same. The public mind is that managed by an oligarchy is this managed just the same. It is just not managed by a single person or institution that everybody can agree to uniformly resent. In other words, it is managed more stably and securely. Let me slow down reading a little bit. When oligarchy is actually good. The real advantage of oligarchy is not that oligarchy is inherently freer than monarchy. It is that oligarchy is inherently more stable and secure than monarchy. By definition, it is easier to overthrow a monarchy. So monarchs work harder on internal security. So they often feel less free, because if at all wobbly, they are less free. In a period of global instability, such as the last quarter millennium, monarchies are at a disadvantage because stability is at a premium. This disadvantage forces them to overinvest in internal security. This is why we think of monarchies, autocracies, and secret police states as essentially synonymous. They are generally foul and wretched. The freedom characteristic of young oligarchies comes from their stability. The stabler a regime is, the more controlled chaos it can safely tolerate. Unstable autocracies cannot even tolerate free enterprises. Extremely stable autocracies can even tolerate free speech. The stabler the government, the more liberty it can safely allow. Unfortunately, this means young oligarchies grow more repressive as they weakened. Popping poppers, paradoxical poppers. This apparent paradox is isomorphic to Karl Popper's famous paradox of tolerance. The party is tolerant as possible, consistent with its own security. It tolerates every party, except any party that would not tolerate the party. If liberalism extends its tolerance to fascism, fascism might overthrow liberalism. We know this because it happened. And fascism in power does not tolerate liberalism. It is so it is intolerant. So we tolerate everyone except the intolerant. Popper, stuck in the 20th century without our superficialist and futuristic hindsight, did not stop to observe that his paradox is perfect multiples of equilibrium. The same logic also advises fascists to repress liberals. It's nice that you are having such a strong spiritual experience, but please do remember that this same shit gets everyone high. Milton, in his great call for freedom of opinion, Areopagitia, has just the same insight. Protestants should tolerate other Protestants, but Catholics are a danger to the state. Catholics must be canceled, maybe even punched. There is always some such theory. Popper and Milton, both personally familiar with the Civil War, are just rebranding its first commandment. Do unto thy neighbor before he does unto thee. Popper's advice is pure Machiavelli. Its message to any regime is, take and hold the levers which control public opinion before somebody else does. If public opinion controls the state, to control the state, control education, journalism, scholarship, and art. The distribution of this control is a military fact on the ground, an arbitrary contingent outcome of history. If public opinion is delivered via TV, send your tank brigade to the TV tower. If it is delivered via internet, filter the internet. Popper has just reinvented the Schmitten exception, the two-door prerogative, or the Bourbon raison d'etat. For the same reason, Elizabeth I...
Good job, man. Good job, my brother. Good job.
Yeah. For the same reason, Elizabeth I banned Ben Jonson's play, Isle of Dogs, so effectively that we don't even know what naughty things it said. Cancel culture is not some Snapchat-era fad. It is older than Shakespeare, older than Rome. There is still a difference between centralized monarchical sovereignty, like the power in two-door England or Nazi Germany, and decentralized oligarchic sovereignty, like power in the modern world. The latter is a lot harder to get rid of. In the old vanished world, there was only one power to persecute you. In the modern world, everyone does unto their neighbor, or is starting to think about it. At least, if their neighbor has put up the wrong lawn sign. In the old world, the king was easy to dethrone. In the modern world, how do you dethrone your neighbor? A decentralized oligarchy is still an autocracy. It has no Hitler, no Goebbels, and needs none. They Victus. Next time we meet, it will be on a tank. Luta continuata.
Anybody want to discuss that at all? No.
Yes. Nope, got nothing.
So it's true that power is more centralized, and I agree that it's when it is the more centralized it is, the easier it is to take down. So I definitely agree with all of that.
Yo, me too. You know, I mean, that's why like what we're dealing with at the moment. You know, I mean, it's like extremely decentralized. Is why like everybody's going like, oh, nobody knows how to fucking like, you know, what I mean, defang this beast. I'm kind of been working on it a little bit, like, but you know, I kind of got like sidetracked with a bunch of fucking nonsense online. But it's the idea of like actually like being able to like state the name and see the fucking religion of academia. And once you see it, then you're able to like name it and you can go, oh, that's what that is. And we can fucking, you know what I mean, like call it out or fucking avoid it or fucking really pick it out as a whole. And I think that might help a little bit as far as shit's concerned.
Yeah, I would agree. Instead of focusing on the power brokers themselves, the individuals, you could instead look to take down a centralized ideology. So maybe in the modern sense, instead of centralized monarchies or governments, we have a little bit more, the power spread out amongst several elite brokers, but the ideology that kind of is promoted might be centralized, and in that you might.
So basically, an old school federalism with several autonomous monarchs. But each of them will have to pitch in for like a central military branch for defense.
Well, I was just saying like that way you can fight the oligarchy, because if you can see it, then you can just call out their nonsense. You know what I mean? And then like you can go, oh, I know what this is. Basic aspirations. But like, yo, we can keep rocking up. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yes, Ryan, I see that. Wow, everybody's just pouncing on Ad Hoc Day. Well, at least I'm reading this better than a computer.
Hey, look here, man.
I'm
like, legit, don't worry about it. There's
No,
always,
I'm not worried. I'm having fun with the chat.
Trolls and shit.
No, like I said, I'm not worried about it. I'm having fun with the chat. I mean, at least my dramatic readings is keeping them engaged. That's why I'm dramatic. All right, getting into this.
Like, Ryan, I don't think the fucking 2020 riots cost $500 billion. Like, yo, but like if it did, that's fucking goddamn crazy. I think it's just because of inflation. Because, like, I'll be real with you, there's no way it was more expensive than the goddamn fucking flood that took down Fukushima. Like, let's keep that 100 right now. Like, they had an insurance claim for a nuclear power plant. Nigga, they take like 7 years to build. Like, legit. Like, there's no way these riots were more expensive than that. But let's keep rocking. I'm sorry, man. Keep going.
All right. Luxus populi suprema lex. Luxus populi suprema lex is real Latin. It is not a real Roman idea. It means public luxury is the supreme law. Few ideas would horrify a proper Roman more. Nor is it Lexus populi suprema lex, which means everyone has to drive a Lexus. Built pronunciation.
I drive an LFA though. I'm saying, I drive a fucking LFA. Just keep that 100.
All right. In the Anglo-American intellectual theory, the idea that public luxury is the supreme law is called utilitarianism. All modern Western schools of economics, Marxist or libertarian, capitalist or communist, are fundamentally utilitarian. So our economies, which are just like all of what we do all day, are run on the principles of luxus populi. As Dr. Phil always said, how's that working out for you? Luxury is pejorative. A utilitarian would say that public utility is the supreme law.
Pejorative. Yeah, there we go.
Okay. But the same utilitarian must acknowledge that utility ascends on a scale from necessity to convenience to luxury. And, to Jeremy Bentham, today's most modern conveniences would appear as miraculous luxuries. This is not an objective difference. Luxury or utility is the satisfaction of desire. Utility is the object of consumption. It's easy to measure the aggregate satisfaction of the public's desires. Count the dollars that consumers paid to produce for the goods and services they consumed. Since the number of dollars a consumer is willing to spend corresponds to their desire for the product, the price of the product must measure its utility. Therefore, the most luxurious products are the most useful. So utility is luxury, at least for a utilitarian. Since we do still feel some shame in this gross doctrine of Luxus Populi, we measure not the aggregate economic consumption, but the aggregate economic production. These are the same numbers, of course. A rise in this number is growth, unless caused by elasticity in our modern high-tech rubber yardstick financial system, which is inflation. To distinguish between growth and inflation, ensuring that when the line goes up, the public desires have actually become more satisfied, we have to measure changes in the quality of goods and services. A utilitarian economic metric like GDP can only be accurately defined as a measure of the aggregate pleasure they produce. Utilitarian macroeconomics is easy. Pleasure growth is price growth minus inflation. While the declaration is clear about the pursuit of happiness, our economists remain troubled by this image of America as a vast massage parlor. So they use euphemisms like hedonics, neither a semiconductor process nor an urban basilisk. Fucking Latin words.
No, it's basilic, basilect, and then it's hedonics. Keep rocking, dude. You're doing good, dude. You're doing good.
I'm working on it. Yeah. Utility has the same advantage as democracy. It is measurable. Suddenly, we have a picture of a practical political system in which voters elect the party that they expect to produce the most utility. That is, maximize their satisfaction of desire. Both the goal of the government and the outcome of the election are hard numbers that everyone can agree on. Certainty is a desirable quality in a political system. Everyone wants a government that can be carried on steam power, operated by mechanical rather than by human judgment. But there is a major problem in measuring utility. As libertarian economists in the Austrian school, is it Austrian? Austrian. Okay.
It's Austrian. It's Austrian.
Yeah, it's Austrian. Austrian school like to observe utility is not comparable across consumers. Pleasure cannot be added or aggregated. This is math abuse. A Big Mac is worth much more to a starving man than to a rich man. Since Bill Gates only has one back, a $100 bill is barely worth bending over for. For a homeless person, it will buy a few hours of pure bliss. You can't add these things. This ambiguity causes political friction between libertarian utilitarians and liberal utilitarians. Liberals observe that taking a Benjamin from a billionaire and giving it to a bum creates an enormous increase in utility. Libertarians observe that this is like totally stealing, and stealing causes persuasive damage to the utility creating economy. So many utility stuff. Watching this debate, we begin to wonder if it is possible for both liberals and libertarians to both be right and both be wrong. This might be possible if neither side was rooted in reality, if their conversation was not the sky, but a fragment of the sky in a puddle. It is easy to forget that national economic planning by hedonic macroeconomics, if you will, is less than a century old. A post-World War I innovation. Even liberal tradition in economics only goes back a quarter millennia to Adam Smith. Humans have been making and trading and borrowing and lending for much longer. And governments, too, have been promoting and regulating and taxing this activity. If we forget everything since 1770, we would still know more. We would still know a lot about political economy.
All right. Yo, TK, nigga, I know you want to chime in on this one. TK.
Oh, where did you
ass up.
Start? What?
Wake your ass up. This is your neck of the woods, motherfucking get it in.
Okay, can you hear me all right?
Yeah,
I hear you just fine.
Everyone falling asleep on the parts they want to comment on most and miss it.
Oh man. Yeah. Sorry. It's usually that I usually have nothing to add, but about hedonomics, it's basically where it comes from hedonism, the idea where pleasure is the ultimate goal in life. Add that with the philosophy of lux populi suprema lex. It's bound to open up a recipe for disaster. Because if you have like a very hedonistic consumer generation with an economy and with an economy that is backed by a government that promotes this, it's bound to cause a lot of problems.
Okay, well, that was fucking enlightening. TK, nigga, get it done.
All right, so there's a lot of different things that go into this. And the number one thing here is that, like, you're conflating a lot of the time the measure of how much you spend for how much you get, which is what they're getting at with conflating inflation and growth. Because, like, from just the raw numbers perspective, it's really difficult to tell whether you just bought twice as much stuff or if all of the stuff that you bought went up twice as much in price. Those two things look exactly the same in, like, these GDP values. So when you govern trying to hit these types of targets, what you end up doing is you end up really abusing the measure itself and creating some really weird things. Notably that, like, as our GDP is going up, like, the share of labor that GDP is going down and down and down and down. And that doesn't matter as long as people can still buy stuff. But that does matter because once you shut down manufacturing, like, you can't just flip a switch and turn it back on again. Like, a lot of these measurements that people like to just automate policy based on, it doesn't actually work once you actually think about how this actually influences our life. Like, we want industry in the United States, not necessarily just because we want to make the stuff here that we use here, but because we want people doing that job here.
So they can buy stuff here. So they can buy shit here. Right. You know what I'm saying? Like, yo, the reason why Henry Ford stood here and gave his people a decent wage wasn't because, like, he was a good guy. It was because of the fact that he wanted to stand here and, you know what I mean, like, give out, he wanted to have individuals be able to buy his fucking cars. And Ryan, by the way, I just looked up them fucking George Floyd riots. Like, all the riots last year cost between $1 and $2 billion. Nigga, like, yo, the motherfucker, there was a ton of goddamn shit that costed like billions and billions and billions of dollars, like hurricanes and fucking earthquakes and I mean fucking tsunamis and shit all across the world. It was not the most ridiculous thing. You know, that was just fucking, what the hell? It was just fucking goddamn that fucking John fucking blowing it out of proportion. Right. Yeah, and that's kind of the, yeah, it's one of the individuals to be able to stand here and buy shit. Nero, you got any fucking shit to add?
No, that sounds about right. As far as hedonics and everything, yeah, I would agree with most of that.
All right, cool. Ad hoc. Let's keep rocking, man. We got, you know, we're gonna do this probably like not a whole lot longer, but let's keep rocking it for a little bit.
All right, we're all good ballistic. I'm loving this and back and forth here. All right, so by satisfying it utterly. The trouble with utilitarianism is deeper than the sibling rivalry between communism and capitalism. It is not even an economic problem. It is a spiritual problem. Utility is the satisfaction of desire. One interesting aspect of this promising new principle, luxus popula suprema lex, is how closely it tracks with ancient Buddhist thought. The Buddha also spoke of desire. The Buddha agreed that the purpose of existence is the conquest of desire. Desire, Siddhartha Gautama taught, can be conquered in just one way, by satisfying it utterly. What is this but the modern idea of utilitarianism? Then the purpose of economic life that is satisfaction of desire. Wait, sorry, we just had a call. We're going to have to correct that attribution. For Siddhartha Gautama, read Hugh Hefner. Apparently, the actual Buddha, if we're hearing this correctly, taught that hedonics could never satisfy the human desire, only inflame it. So utilitarianism would be actually the opposite of Buddhism. Well, that's cool, but Playboy is valid too, man.
Oh, man. The state of modernity in a nutshell.
The problem with utilitarianism is that it doesn't actually quite match our goal. Our goal was government for the people. If we equate good government with maximum consumption of utility, we are equating what is good for people with what they want. The hedonomics of the Luxus Populi era measures their revealed preferences, not their expressed preferences, but the fundamental error is the same. As we climb the pyramid of needs from necessity to convenience to luxury, what we naturally want diverges from what is naturally good for us. When you're dying of thirst, what you want is exactly what is good for you. When you're living like Hugh Hefner, what you want and what is good for you may be exact opposites. At the top end of the economic scale, living well is a constant struggle against desire. A struggle the Buddha, born a prince, knew well. We are all not born as princes. Our lives are full of technical luxuries that the princes of old could have never imagined. When we combine this error with the error of aggregating incompatible utility scales, we realize that all form of hedonic or utilitarian economics could be very far away from making sense, and the era of technical progress is moving them away from sanity. Hedonomics plus technology is a recipe for social diabetes. Technology and the resource curse. 20th century economics are oft puzzled by a phenomena they call the resource curse, which nations with more natural resources have consistently worse outcomes. This would seem to blatantly flout the axiom of modernity, luxus populi suprema lex. Aspects of the curse, such as Dutch disease, are understood, but they still fit poorly with classic liberal economics. When the Dutch strike oil, Ricardian trade theory would suggest the Dutch economy should shift from making the stuff, which can now be imported from China, to servicing industries such as peeling grapes for oil drillers. How is this a disease? Who wants to work in a factory making stuff instead of totally getting free stuff from a pipe someone else stuck in the ground? And yet, Venezuela, which has the most oil in South America by far, is the worst basket case in South America by far. What we realize is that economic activity, humans working and trading, is essential to a society, a civilization, and a nation. An economy in which 5 people stick a pipe in the ground and everyone else lives on government checks does not seem to work as a society, a civilization, or a nation. This is the resource curse. But what people don't realize is that sufficiently advanced technology is like striking oil. 30 engineers at WhatsApp used to run 1 billion accounts. An economy in which 5 people, or even 500,000, lay out chips and design software, and everyone else lives on government checks. Also, does not seem to work as society, civilization, or a nation. What the resource curse tells us is that fully automated luxury communism, the hypothetical apoptosis of luxus populi suprema lex, is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. Some of it is in Venezuela. Most of the rest is in the Persian Gulf. Heavy religion seems to immolate the disease. The 20th century dinosaur juice curse is just a preview of the hell that 21st century technology is scheduled to unleash upon the earth. For the closer look, we come to this tech resource curse apocalypse, the closer we come to hell. Except for Lausch-talented, largely parasitic elite, which is doing just fine. So is Venezuela's elite. This problem is only becoming more urgent. We cannot even start to solve it until we understand it. And we have not even started to understand it.
Anybody want to touch on this? I feel like Neuro should chime in here.
I need a minute to drink up here.
So the resource curse is so complex that although what he's saying is generally true, he's not taking into account, interventionism, which is a problem. When a lesser developed, lesser military, a country with lesser military power has vast resources, it's often exploited by a more technologically advanced and military powerful nation. And that does a lot to destabilize the society of the resource-rich nation and kind of stunt its progression.
Well, that's kind of not it.
Yeah,
that is part of it. So there's a reason why the United States. There's a reason the United States.
Venezuela can stand here and pump out all this oil and then tie its economy to oil, and then, not have any manufacturing or anything else for anyone else to do. They just have socialism. And then the moment, fucking oil prices drop, they can't afford the socialism anymore, and the fucking country turns into a basket case.
Yep.
All right, but all right. Why does the oil price drop in Venezuela? Because the United States then tries to stop exports from Venezuela and instead looks to OPEC, right?
No, because OPEC
oil consumption,
demand goes
the price
down.
in oil doesn't necessarily go down because oil consumption goes down.
It does too.
It's usually through political maneuvering. If anything, with China, again, we'll get into China. Rapid industrialization in China has caused China to consume more and more and more oil. So the market for oil is probably larger now than it was 50, 60 years ago. So if oil prices drop now, it's not necessarily because the consumption of oil is dropping.
Okay, all right. So let me break this down because it's kind of important to understand. All right, oil has peaks and valleys, right? Like the peaks, the reason why oil goes up in price as a whole are usually because like hurricanes, earthquakes, transportation disruptions, fucking oil processing disruptions, terrorism in the Middle East, pipeline problems, fucking upticks in cold weather, right? This will cause oil to go up in price because demand increases, right? That's an overall type of thing. Or, supply shortens. One of the two. Right, that's what causes oil to go up. Then oil will go back down, right, because everything will start shutting down due to the price of oil being too high. So transport becomes more expensive. Individuals drive less. People will start buying like smaller cars, use less oil, more battery operated cars, more electric cars, things of this nature, which actually eliminates demand, right? And when the demand is eliminated, price goes down.
All right, so demand, though, rarely goes down. In fact, the only time that I'm aware of that it's gone down is 2020 because of Corona.
No, it went down in 2009, 2011.
By what, like 3 barrels?
No, by a lot. Because it hit $137 a barrel, the whole economy started shutting down.
And if that were the case, then you would see the same type of destabilization in Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and those countries. And they're pretty much overloaded with luxury, and their populace is doing pretty good, and that's because they're under the good graces of the United States.
No, it's because of the fact that they have a buildup of like cash for like 7 years out.
So in other words, what I'm saying is, although what is being written here is correct to a point, he's not taking into consideration interventionism as well, which has plagued Venezuela, caused Venezuela to go socialist to begin with, and also stopped it from engaging in other markets except for oil, because the United States kind of has ostracized it from the global community and gone to other countries and kind of pumped up other countries instead of Venezuela. I mean, the United States has been trying to
nationalize its oil.
The United States has been trying to stunt Venezuela for years and years and years, and they've staged 3 or 4 coups there.
When did Venezuela nationalize its oil? Do you know?
I would say probably in the 60s. 60s or 70s.
It was in the 1950s.
Okay, 50s, a decade off.
Right. Yeah, I'm saying like they nationalized their oil back in the 1950s.
Yeah, but the United States has been around in South America since probably far longer, since the 19th century.
Yeah, well, the Spanish were there before them, right? But they
even
nationalized
the Americans.
oil.
Look at the Panama Canal, right?
Right, they've been relying on the oil for social
Americans.
programs. Forever.
I mean, do I think that socialism is the best way for Venezuela? If they were able to diversify what they were doing, I think they could survive with socialism. Can they diversify what they're doing? No, I don't think so, because of external pressures.
Well, it's not just that. They don't cultivate their land. They don't build anything else up. They just fucking rely on oil.
Well, they tried to cultivate their land. They redistributed and had communes and co-ops.
That's a really bad way to like cultivate your land.
I agree, but still, I mean, again, the socialism and the leaning towards socialism is, I think, a direct result of American interventionism. I mean, you can't disentangle them, and you can't completely attribute Venezuela's failures to the resource curse. And you can't, at least in my opinion, you can't espouse the resource curse without saying that all these countries that are rich in resources are all then targeted by the world powers. Because we see the same thing happening in Africa, right? Or even Afghanistan with the lithium deposits. And, it's just when the United States sees a country that's rich in resources, we go over there, we destabilize, we change the regimes, we stunt. Look what happened when Iran nationalized its oil fields in the post-World War II. We destroyed the democratic process there, took away the Western-leaning regime, installed a tyrannical Shah, and made sure that the oil flowed into BP.
Well, the Shah wasn't tyrannical. The Shah was, very liberal, and that was their problem with him.
Right. The Shah killed many, many people. He wasn't even Iranian. He was Armenian. Yeah. He was a Pahlavi, and he killed many, many, many people. He was very tyrannical.
He wasn't tyrannical. You know what I'm saying? He just got rid of the religious leadership that was trying to drag the country backwards.
Yeah. He also got rid of reporters. He got rid of anybody who wrote dissenting opinions. I mean, it's kind of well known.
Well, yeah, I mean, like Russia and China and fucking Saudi Arabia does this now, and nobody bitches about it.
But the main thing is, I agree with everything the main thing is this, so we don't get into, and I'm trying to offer an oppositional view to make this a little spicy for you.
I got you.
I got to forgive me. I'm not trying to be annoying, Tom. So you have to forgive me.
You're cool.
Okay, but I agree with most of everything that's said, but I would add on to that part of the resource curse is interventionism. That's all I'm saying.
I mean, like the U.S. is most definitely fucking around with Venezuela and South America as a whole. But like the problem is like when you rely on one resource and that resource in particular goes up and down in price drastically, it's gonna fuck with shit when you rely on it at a high price.
I agree with that. I do agree with that.
Like that's the fucking problem. Like you can't run like your social programs off of like $147 a barrel oil and think it's gonna stay there. And that's what Venezuela did. And that's why they're fucked up right now. Like they borrowed money at $147 a barrel, and then they can't pay it back when it dropped down to like 30. Like this happens a lot, like throughout time. If you look at like the history price of fucking oil, it's just up and down and up and down and up and down and up and down. It's tragic. All right, look, let's finish up like this next fucking piece of this, and then we're gonna shut this down because it's been 2.5 hours, and I want to fucking go, get in bed, and get some pussy. So let's keep rocking.
All right. So, Salus Populi Suprema Lex. This is the original and correct principle of all government, famous for millennia, never changed and never improved on. The health of the people is the supreme law. Alas, it is easier to say than understand, and easier to understand than to implement. The word salus, literally health, is the core of the question. In 2020, salus has taken on a very literal meaning. While this medical definition is not wrong, nor is it complete. A broader sense of salus might be translated as human condition. Certain members of the legal profession accepted a human has both a body and a soul.
Oh, wow.
Weird joke. So we might say that the purpose of a government is to defend and cultivate the bodies and souls of its subject. Citizens begs the question of vox populi vox dei. The central problem of Salus Populi Suprema Lex is that while the health of a body can be quantified, sort of, the health of a soul is a qualitative and aesthetic judgment. Usually this is a very easy judgment at an individual level, but it is completely resistant to the quantitative methods of the 20th century mass administration. Quantitative metrics of administrative success are inherently popular in an oligarchy because they enable impersonal, procedural, and unaccountable decision-making. When the criterion of success is qualitative, aesthetic, or even just unscientific, the decisions can only be handed to a single author, chief, director, general, or CEO. This individual may tire of serving as a passive decision oracle for procedural exceptions and try to manage proactively by initiative and command. And you are at monarchy. This is why Luxus Populi remains so popular. It fits the tools of the procedural state. Cinema has long since accepted the auteur theory. Chain restaurants compete with independent chefs on price, never on quality. And if making a movie or preparing a menu is an intangible creative whole that must be the vision of a single human mind and would be a mess with one or more director or more than one cook, how much more so is government? Therefore, the qualitative rule of Salus Populi, though it does not demand a monarchy, is historically bound as the quantitative Luxus Populi to oligarchy. Recovering the Art of Government. Here we arrive at the meat of Grey Mirror, the operating manual for the next prince. While every historical situation is new, the next regime will face an unprecedented challenge. Global regime change on a planet festooned with H-bombs. The birth of this regime will be as spectacular and irreversible as a rocket launch and as binary. And it must be as carefully engineered. No one's country can blow up on the pad. And we have absolutely no idea what to do. We need to build a rocket. We're not even sure we know physics. Since for a government to work, one or a few must lead and the rest must follow. We actually have two arts to relearn. Not just the art of ruling, but what Wyndham Lewis called the art of being ruled. The latter is probably the hardest. Our knowledge of 21st century governance comes from three places. Abstract theorizing, always the worst possible way to think. Personal experience in the 20th century governance, which is sometimes useful and usually much worse than useless, since it is usually experience in how to do the wrong thing badly. And finally, old books by people from incredibly strange countries who are dead and don't answer their email. By choosing the old objective of government, the salus populi, we have made the dead men happy. At least we know what moon our rocket is headed for. Still, neither we nor our old sages have any clear idea on what the salus populi means in the real 21st century. Nor, since the question is neither indicative nor deductive, but critical and aesthetic, can logic force us to agree. De gustibus non dispartum.
Non-disputedum. Yeah, all right. Oh yeah, man. Like, yo, I think we're gonna end the motherfucking chapter there. But like, legitimately, like, I don't know, like, fucking Neuro, what do you think of this book, man? Like, fucking, as far as like what you're hearing.
All right, so he makes claim. He all right. Some of his theories and claims are undisputable. I agree with that. I think, though, that's in some terms, he looks toward, a rhetoric instead of trying to discern what is actually happening. So there are some instances, in my opinion, where it's more rhetoric than fact, but the vast majority of the work, I think, is spot on with the way he critiques, the modern structure of governance.
Yeah, me too. And I mean, I really like his work as far as stuff's really concerned, and like looking at government and looking at the way things are, and like looking at it from a historical perspective, and not just like historical as in like 1700s, but going back, like 15th to 14th to 13th century, and really, getting into the meat and potatoes of what they would say. You know what I'm saying? Like, what they would think of what's going on in the modern day. You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of where my mentality comes down to, right? Tkmaou, my brother, what do you got to say about this last little chapter here?
I mean, it's kind of basic stuff, right?
He's like, yo, man, yo niggas is behind me right now. Like, yo, you understand? No. I'm way past where this is.
No. Like, one of the biggest things that I had to learn how to do when I was just socialized as a kid was learn how to follow instructions. And as soon as I tried to learn how to do that, I immediately realized how much easier it is to give instructions than receive them, like as a fundamental premise. Because the thing about receiving instructions well is that you have to understand the intention of whoever is governing you. And that's kind of fundamentally where the United States government is failing right now, right? Because, like, it doesn't know what it wants, so it can't tell the citizens what to do. And so, of course, the citizens are going to throw a bitch fit about that because they're not being told to do something clearly. And that's mostly because our citizens don't know how to be citizens. They know how to be fucking, a mix of welfare queens and hillbillies. Like, it's a really weird combination of different social factors we've got in a lot of situations here in the U.S. But I think that he's pointing out like a couple like fundamental facts that are just observations on the ground.
We have hillbillies who think they're Thomas Jefferson.
Not wrong.
You know what I mean? I think that's kind of the mentality. Like, and then on top of that, you have these metropolitan and cosmopolitan individuals who, you know, they could probably live anywhere in the world and do what they do. So they're not really tied to the country as a whole, which again is another piece of the fucking problem. You know,
we have a percentage of the population who unironically identifies themselves as aliens.
Yeah, that's a bit of an issue, right? So ad hoc, you know what I'm saying? What do you think about this last fucking piece right here?
I'd have to say he's kind of onto something, especially more when it comes to recovering the art of the government. If you want to lead, you first have to learn how to follow. Case in point, I didn't become a squad leader just because I had said, all right, I'm going to be a squad leader now. I had to learn to be a member of the team first, be accepted as part of the team before I could, you know, place myself in that position of authority and have it be respected. Like my boys respect me
never
now
be
because
too
I moved down
proud
there on
to
the ground with
sweep
them.
the floor. You know what I'm saying? Never be too proud to sweep the floor. That's something that like I've spoken on it many times, and it's something I was always taught, and I've always told individuals, you know what I'm saying, who were like underneath of me, you know, when I was in management, when I was in leader in work and whatever, and that's how I became a leader in work, is because you take that responsibility of going like, yo, this is something that I'm going to take care of and have responsibility for, and I'm going to show that I have the initiative to do that, you know, and I think that's important as part of government, you know what I mean, as a whole, you know what I mean, it's like showing the process, you know, that's kind of the mentality.
It's kind of monkey see, monkey do. If you're in that position of authority and you show that nothing is beneath you, like you're willing to get down and do the most menial, dirty jobs possible, you make the people who do those jobs feel like you actually care about what they do, and that's what I really think people want.
Yeah, I agree. That's a good point. No, I just wanted to highlight what he just said, because that's really important.
I feel you, right? I'll be honest with you. I completely forgot what he just said. You know what I'm saying? That's probably because I've been streaming for 2 hours and 45 minutes.
All right. So he's basically saying that these people who are of lore, who do engage in like more menial tasks and such, they have to be appreciated as well. And that appreciation will translate into them being more motivated and more productive and more, you know, patriotic. At least that's what I think you're saying. More patriotic.
Oh yeah, that is.
And I believe in that so much. That's true.
Yeah. To put things a little bit in perspective, there's an anime that I'm watching where the realist becomes king, and it's another isekai. But the difference is that he doesn't go out to save the world by the blade. He goes out to basically save the world through administrative reform. And when one episode, it was a fairly recent one, he calls all his clerks into the throne room, and he says, you know, you all have been working day and night, like 5 days and nights with no sleep, no relaxation, getting this kingdom back on its feet. I would award you a medal for this, but we don't have the money to pay for that shit. But what I am going to do is I'm going to give you 5 days off, the next 5 days off of work, and y'all are also free to take a bottle of that really expensive wine in the basement that we don't really have any use for. And he said, you know, and this is kind of where I think it's important, you can do whatever you want with it. Because in an aristocracy, if a king says that to you, the expectation is that you drink it, you come back to him and say, oh, that was some good fucking wine. He said, no, you can do whatever the fuck you want with it. You can sell it for money. You can drink it if you want to. You can trade it for anything else. And that was important. And I actually felt the emotion that these poor clerks just broke down and started crying. They felt so inspired because they had been working with this king day and night, no sleep, sleeping in the stateroom for all these policy reforms. And that they got what they really wanted in life, which was just some acknowledgement from the highest authority in the world that their work was important. And they got some time off, and they got appreciated by some time off and some rich stuff that they could use to do whatever they want with.
I know what. I've read that manga, and you are a nerd.
You are a nerd. I'll be real with you.
I am
Like,
a nerd.
let me put this way, right? I think that the appreciation for the individuals who actually make the world go round, you know what I'm saying, is an important thing, and it needs to like stop being used for, you know what I'm saying, like company recognition, right? And I say that because last year when the coronavirus happened, like I was traveling all across this country, right? And, you know, I mean, I was in Chicago, I was in fucking Kansas City, I was in fucking Mississippi, I was in fucking Ohio, I was in Kentucky, I was all over the fucking place. And everywhere I went, you know what I'm saying, like all these companies were like, oh, thank you, truckers, right? And I'm like, bruh, I'll be honest with you, I don't give a fuck about your thanks right now. You know what I'm saying? Like, why don't you, you know what I'm saying, give me more money or offer me like fucking free food or whatever the case is, right? You know what I mean? Like, instead of saying thank you to me, you know what I'm saying? Like, why don't you, you know what I'm saying, like show you actually appreciate a motherfucker, like make me a sandwich or something. You know what I mean? That's kind of the mentality, right? Fucking thank God Neuro came back, man. Listen, we were gonna wrap this motherfucker up, and I wanted to make sure Neuro got his shill on. Like shill's like, yo, make sure you got your shit. Like we got Navison yet to motherfucking wrap this up, and then we're gonna go into like fucking chilling and ad hocking you real quick. So motherfucking my boy Neffel, fucking go ahead, man. Like fucking tell me what you think, my brother.
I say it's a pretty good start. We could keep going into a series so we gradually get more people to start seeing patterns.
I feel where you are. Pattern recognition is important. You know what I mean? Like, you know, red, blue, red, green, red, yellow, green. You know what I'm saying? Things of this nature. Yeah. You got to watch that shit on the street lights and whatnot. You know what I mean? It gives you messages from the motherfucking interdimensional space demons. All right, let's go.
So I can neither confirm nor deny it.
I do have a quick question. I do have a quick question before we go. So the hedonistic culture, the hedonics that he talks about, do you think that lends itself to people, you know, marginalizing and not appreciating, you know, these laborers that do make the world go round and are the real reason for corporations' success? I think it's all just wrapped up in this materialistic culture.
Well, we've always been like, we have been for a long time wrapped up in this materialistic culture. And I think that, like, if I'm perfectly honest, I think it makes us more feminine as a society, right? Because the individuals who, you know, fucking stand here and really like buy all these garbage products and are really, you know, like doing all these type of things are, you know, like 80% of like all like fucking consumer, like basic consumer goods are bought by females in this country. That's why, like, you know, they're the number ones who are fucking like advertised to. That's why, like, you know, everywhere, like on like sports and shit, you see them trying to put pink on, you know, like fucking everything is like fucking pushed towards them because they're the people who impulse buy and buy like, you know what I mean, like medium goods and shit. Like men invest in assets and, you know, fucking like vehicles and things of this nature. So like, and that's why like truck commercials are based towards dudes. Like each one has its own thing. And this hedonistic mentality, you know, is really based in this mental of buying without actually fucking like working to pay for it first. And it really does like marginalize the individuals who, you know, go out here and grind every day and don't have the ability to fucking like, you know, just go and do whatever they want, you know. But it's a different way of doing. I don't know, man. Like fucking, I'm not sure, to be honest with you. You know what I mean? I kind of lost track of what my mental was.
Yeah, to kind of, I think, kind of go into that. You know, when these companies celebrate breaking these, you know, these milestones, these are things like case in point, like trucking. Like say, you know, say like Ford sells like, I don't know, 500,000 trucks this year, like within a 2-month time frame. Like all these executive types, they'll get together and they'll celebrate this milestone and they'll completely forget about the guys down in the factory on the assembly line putting it together. They celebrate themselves and not who actually made it possible.
Well, yeah, because education is celebrated. You know what I'm saying? Like that mentality of being an aristocrat is celebrated. The things that like fucking actual men do in this society aren't celebrated and haven't been for fucking years. Like nobody wants their kid to grow up to be a fucking plumber. You know what I mean? But we should. Like, I feel like we've lost honor in, you know what I mean, like fucking appreciating the working man as a whole. And that kind of aggravates me. You know,
and it does, because that's what the fucking Democrats are running their platform on right now, is the working man.
Well, you know, they're not, though. They're not running their platform on the working man, right? They're running their platform
just to get
on
the votes.
Yeah. they're running their platform on the Cosmopolitan, right? Because that's their voting base. You know what I'm saying? Or the female, or whatever. Like they're trying to get like every marginalized group together. You know what I mean? They go, oh man, you're a victim. Because, and again, like, if you get into political energy, this guy talks about political energy. The motherfuckers who feel attacked are the individuals who are going to come out and vote. That tends to be how it works. Because like a caged or animal backed into a corner is more aggressive than an animal, you know what I'm saying? It's kind of just out, feeling like it's confident and shit. Like the animal that's already fed doesn't have to work real hard to get food. He's not hungry. That tends to be how it works. So if you drag a steak in front of that motherfucker who's hungry, he's gonna snatch it up. That's the mentality,
Yeah, I get that.
So all right, let's talk about shilling. Ad Hoc got a channel, you know what I'm saying? What's your channel called? Ad Hoc.
I'm generally running the channel known as Graveyard Shift. It's me just doing just random commentary on stuff. What I'm focusing on right now is just unscripted opinion pieces. I get a topic and you listen to me ramble for 30 minutes to 45 minutes about shit and just try to kind of just ramble my way through it and try to figure shit out. As I go on, I may do new stuff. It's a fairly new thing. I'm fairly new to this whole thing overall.
All right. So, link is in the description in front of Ad Hoc's name. You know what I'm saying? Make sure you click on that link and sub to his channel. All right. Neuro, my brother, fucking me and him has been like in his server and I've been in there getting it in, like 3 or 4 nights a week in these debates and having fun and, wrecking shit and, coming up with different opinions and whatnot. I thoroughly enjoy being over here. It's a great place. They're heavily moderated. So like all of my trolley people, you know what I'm saying? Might want to watch it back over there. They're not about that life. Right. But Neuro, you know what I'm saying? Like, you want to show your stuff out a little bit? Cause I'm gonna tell you what, your link is also in the description in front of his name. It's a permanent link. You can click it whenever you want to. You're watching this tomorrow, you're watching this a week from now, you still be able to click it. Neuro, you want to tell us about what y'all do over there? And what the deal is, what the goals are?
Sure. So first, I'd like to thank you guys for having me around. I've really enjoyed, reading this and hearing you guys' opinions on it and discussion on it. Tom hangs out there. It's a political server, current events, religion. We just have open discussions. We tackle stuff like abortion, but also complex stuff like theory of atonement. We go from religion to current events to politics to social issues. We handle everything, and we're a growing server. We're reasonably new in the grand scheme of things, but we're growing fast, and we're one of the more active servers right now. You can get there using the link or the vanity URL, is it called discord.gg/debates. And, it is moderated, so we you can't come in there, sling slurs around or certain types of, you can't post Nazi memes and stuff like that. But ultimately, we try to allow as much free speech as possible under Discord terms of service. And I'd like to see anybody over there. Any new faces are appreciated. Come in the VCs, talk to us, or listen to some of the stage events that we put on. Sometimes we get as much as 300 listeners. Tom, you're always welcome there. I'd love to do a stage event with you. And hopefully you bring over your crowd from here and they can hear you in action over there debating all the people. Because Tom just loves coming over there, beating up everybody upside the head, and then leaving usually abruptly.
It's amazing. Like legitimately, like fucking the link is in the description. Also, Dudleyus just put it in the motherfucking chat. Like, dude, click the link, head over. I'm not like it is fun as shit. Like you can come over here and like I'll be running motherfuckers over. It is amazing, right? Ryan, look, man. All right, sometimes like there's places that we can't put all of our shit. My server, you know what I'm saying? The deal. The link is always in the description, but my server. It's free speech, and if you're a really good troll, I will make you a moderator because that's how I feel. I should be running my shit, and it's worked for like 3 or 4 years so far. So we've been doing good for 5 years at this point, actually. And Neffel, do you have anything to chill out? I'm pretty sure you don't, man. You ain't even running the fucking channel anymore, are you?
No, not really. I got nothing. I'm more tied to IRL stuff anyway than online shit.
I feel you. You know what I'm saying? But y'all know the deal, man. I want to thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you, Neuro, for coming. Thank you, Ad Hoc, for reading, man. You know the deal. Look, Jay did a hell of a job tonight. Real shit, man. Fucking like it.
I gotta go make a video now. I've got like 2 or 3, 4 topics now that I gotta go make videos on. I've only got so much time in the day. I feel like I'm working 3 jobs and I've still got to do this shit.
I feel you. I feel you. You know what I'm saying? I'm gonna take my ass to bed and curl up next to my girl and shit. I don't even know if I got the fucking energy to go bang her out. But I gotta do what I gotta do, handle my manly duties and shit. So I'm gonna holler at y'all motherfuckers later.
Nothing else, lie on your back and let her take a ride.
Yeah, I'm with you. She'll probably fucking do that shit too. She'll take it. Like, yo, it is what it is. Anyway, yo, look, man, I'm Tom Pease of Pino News. Y'all know the deal. Like, share, and subscribe. Hit that motherfucking Streamlabs link. Hit the Patreon. Become a Patreon on the channel. Support what I do. It is what it is. I'm gonna holler at y'all later. Peace.